Hello, and welcome to a brand new Unsourced Wall Radio. I'm joined again by my good friend Mikhail, and we'll be talking about the extended editions of Rebel Moon Chapter 1 and 2, Chalice of Blood and Curse of Forgiveness, as well as the other new release this weekend, M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. I'm really excited. It's a big week for releases, streaming or otherwise. So I think it's been really fun just to dig into these. Why don't you just introduce yourself first, and then we'll get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikhail, and I enjoy talking about movies. I run a newsletter on Substack called Textual Variations, I've been on Unsourced Wall a few times, and I like to talk about mostly we talk about comic book based films and mainstream cinema and stuff like that, and it's pretty fun. And thank you for having me again.
All right, no problem. It's always great to have you. I love these conversations, and we can go pretty long sometimes, but I feel like that's the order of the day, especially when it comes to our first topic. We'll talk about Trap later. I think it'd be good to talk about Trap after Rebel Moon. But with Rebel Moon, I think there's some good stuff to talk about, but I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a lot, at least not for me. I like to hear what you want to say. But for me, I'm pretty cut and dry with Rebel Moon. Some initial thoughts. I appreciated the theatrical cuts, such as they were the original PG-13 cuts, but I always felt like it was a ridiculous thing to have happen. People will be like defenders, big rabid Snyder heads. And I'm a Snyder fan. I like his movies a lot. I love Sucker Punch. People can't say that a lot, but I love it. But Rebel Moon's release was so transparently cynical a play on Netflix's part, and it led to some really hack job films like Rebel Moon Part 1, back then called A Child of Fire, which I think is a way better name than what the extended edition gets. Makes a lot more sense.
I have no idea why they changed the titles. Honestly, it's
No,
like
I know that's okay. So we'll get into that, but let's just do the titles right now. The titles are a good place to start. I feel like they did the reverse effect for each. Where like in the theatrical cuts, you have they're titled "A Child of Fire" and "The Scar Giver," right? And then in the extended editions, they're called "Chalice of Blood" and "Curse of Forgiveness." And I feel like you just kind of swap those around a little bit, and you have two solid titles because the Child of Fire I think makes so much more sense for part one because about Korra and like introducing her and all that, and it works even better with part one extended edition because you see like her gigantic scar that goes all
mm,
across her body. Like she's got like like flame scarring. She's got burns. Like okay, that's a good title. Chalice of Blood is so vague and minute a title, and I feel like you only really get it because they mentioned a chalice of honor. It's like okay, Chalice of Blood is a play on that line in the film because it's not about honorable, it's about being like vengeful, revenge. Gore, guts, all that kind of stuff, right?
I
Um,
actually thought though it was a reference to the girl, the princess. Wasn't she also called the Chalice at some point?
I don't know. I think you're right. Again, I don't think I think Chalice of Blood is so vague that it can be applicable to a lot of things. But that's how I took it. Like I was trying to find it like inside itself. So I don't think the princess is really that important until like the second movie,
Mm,
in my view. Like she's much more of a figure there. And I actually love Curse Forgiveness as a title because it plays into her a lot more. Like it plays into like
yeah.
why the coup happened, like how they feel about themselves, their insecurities, their regrets, like forgiving themselves, and also that forgiveness, mercy, as it were, is a curse for like this imperial and fascistic dictatorship. Like how dare you forgive? We're supposed to conquer. We're supposed to be like again aggressive, always on the attack, always on the offensive. So I love that title, and I hate the title Scargiver. Okay, because they never really explain it. I thought part two was gonna have like a big sequence, and okay, we're jumping ahead here a little bit. When I saw the shadow cut of part one, sorry, part two, there's that portion where she's like giving the backstory to like how she assassinated the king and queen and the princess, right? She helped
Yeah.
assassinate them, and then like it kind of cuts to like the outside of the ship. It's like, and I fought my way out to escape ship, and I flew out like, and like Natasha would come like, oh, okay. So in the extended edition, we're probably gonna get like the scene, and we're probably figure out why she's called the Scar Giver and all that, right? Um, and then no, we don't. They're like, okay. So why she called the Scar Giver? She's like, she's to kill people. I don't know if she's giving people scars. I thought maybe she was gonna kill. She would give her like her adopted father a scar, you know, like fighting him
Yeah.
or something like. But no, so I love Cursor Forgiveness a lot more as a title because it actually has something to do with the fucking movie, you know?
Yeah, I would say it does feel a bit more apt also for the extended cut because they do bring back that notion of forgiveness towards the very end in the
Mm-hmm.
extra footage, which I liked. Just just throwing it out there, I think maybe part of the idea behind Scargiver was maybe that like her act, which was, I mean, like, they spread this whole propaganda about her, having, destroyed the royal family all by herself. And I kind of feel maybe the idea was that that's like a scar upon the empire or something.
Yeah, but that's so esoteric and like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad I see that my other good friend here, Aki, is watching. Yes, we're talking about Rebel Moon first. We're talking about Trap. So I hope you enjoy the Rebel Moon discussion. But no, definitely, I thought that too. But like, these movies are so blunt, you know, and they're so in your face that like that notion is just so like I don't know, so metaphorical. Like I feel a little bit cheated. It's a little bit cheated if it's like if it's like that. Um, but just heading into um, part one, Showers of Blood was one I was most excited to see because right when extended cut, sorry, the original cut came out, they released like a week or two later the novelization, right, um, by V. Castro, based on the original script and what have you, plans and I believe lore from the first film that was dropped or cut out or just kind of used as background for the source books and all that. Because they mentioned that they have like a bunch of source books, they have a bunch of lore books for this film and possible franchise. So you know what? And I think a lot of that went into the book, and I love the book. I end up really liking the book a lot. I think that after everything, even right now, my favorite experience of Rebel Moon is the novelizations because despite what the director's cuts add back in, the novelizations have even more of an edge, and I'll get into that in
Hmm.
just a sec. But I did enjoy part one Significant cut a lot more because it had more of that stuff. I was reading the book, I'm like, oh, this would be so cool to see. This would be so cool to see come to fruition. That makes a lot more sense. And like, okay, this is character detail that brings these characters more to life. That gives them something extra, to grow with the audience with, to latch on to. And so I'm really glad to see a lot of that carry over to the extension of part one. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it was there. And like, okay, this is fun. And I had it's a really great time watching it. I felt like, while a lot of people will say this movie is completely different, I won't say that because none of these are that much different, but the execution and the sort of weight of them all is different. I know people point out, okay, but that's a different take and that's a slightly different angle, and these dialogue is a little bit different, stuff like that. But like a lot of those things are just kind of really, really small. Like they just kind of build up a little bit more, of course, but in the moment they're not that noticeable, so I don't really count them as changes. Um, so the great structure of the films are basically the same, but with part one at least, it it gives it a lot more of a platform. It gives it a lot more to chew on, and I think it widens the feel of the scope and scale of the story. Where you're really getting the impression that you're watching a larger epic play out than you do with part one, the theatrical cut, which is, I think, a patchwork um, mess. But what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting how the theatrical edition it really feels like choppy, like there is missing tissue there. Like you don't like it just jumps around like through what appear to be blatantly missing scenes or passages or moments. And The director's cut, it really flows well. You can actually see, like, okay, you can now feel how the scenes, like, actually lead into each other. I mean, sometimes it's still, I could maybe complain here and there because I'm like, why did they cut to Jimmy right now? I'm not sure. That feels like a weird transition, or maybe something like still feels a bit missing or out of place, or maybe they switch the order around. But just as a whole, you can really, you don't feel like it throws you out of the experience, anymore. It's like, okay, so now it's like, here's what's happening here, and here's what's happening there, and this is like how, okay, you have these parallel story tracks, and they're flowing, they're flowing nicely. They're nicely balanced. And so as a whole, you kind of see, okay, that's what really they were trying to do, and then they had to um cut like a lot of things that actually help this work, like as a whole, and a lot of issues that I had were addressed. A lot of the holes or the gaps were filled in, which I really appreciated.
No, I completely agree 100%. And that's why I loved about the novel is that you see like how the story and the narrative like is so much more like grander, like not only are you getting the sort of recruitment seven samurai plot, like we're going from planet to planet finding people, but you're seeing how the stakes are sort of evolving on back on Velt, back at the village, which I think was really a huge crucial part of the film that was missing from the theatrical cut, because like you sort of lose the context of the stakes a lot with the theatrical cut. Like like what are we even doing? Like are they waiting? Like what is even going on? Like is it really this important? And I do love that the extended edition, you see you know, that they are not sitting on their hands. They're active. They're planning. They're preparing on their own for other eventualities. And I just thought that kind of really helped sell this as a story worth investing into, like with the characters like Aris and and Den again and sorry Dev, um, and the uh, Korra's other adoptive father on the village. I forget his name.
I
But
I don't even think they mentioned it, to be honest. Like I
I
was
don't
like,
I
wait,
don't
what's that farmer's name again?
Who
Whatever.
knows? Who knows? But again, I really love that kind of stuff, and just seeing more of Jimmy and more of his evolution and more about his character growth, and just how he's kind of dealing with a burgeoning sapiens is wonderful stuff. It's incredible stuff. Like the
Oh
sequence
yeah.
where he's just sort of ruminating in nature among the weeds. It's like the fireflies just kind of circle around him, and it starts raining. It's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. Like it's so crazy. People have mentioned like the color grading being different, and yes, the color grading and the extended cuts is different slightly from shot to shot. But like, I don't know. Again, so my big issue with both of these, like, I feel like there was enough tissue, enough meat there on the bone to make really good PG-13 cuts. Okay,
Yes.
like why was the color grading so much worse? That you don't need that to be in the extended cut. You could have done that for the PG-13 cut. Or why was the scene of Jimmy like like soliloquizing to the earth or to Velt, and it blesses him and baptizes him in rain? Why was that in the R-rated cut? That didn't need to be an R-rated cut. That wasn't R-rated. Put it in the
Y-
freaking PG-13 cut. It's a standout sequence. It's my favorite scene in both of these films. It's wonderful. It's magnificent. It's like the first time I'm like, this is a Zack Snyder movie. Okay, this is like the metaphorical, visual, like grandiosity, that I expect from his films.
Yeah, like it's got like the mythic,
Yes,
grandeur and sort of evoking Norse gods, and like, communing with like all like doing that visually, which I think he really enjoys. He really likes that um I don't know, that sort of mythic grandeur, to evoke that throughout his blockbuster films. And yeah, I mean, I sort of feel there are a lot of potential answers, to that. One of them being that I honestly don't think that for the amount of footage and amount of film and everything that they were working with that Zach actually had maybe all that much time in post production. Like, a lot of the times when you see a movie that's like, that comes out with bad editing or stuff or whatever, like sometimes it can really be a scheduling issue because it's like effects take time, color grades take time, reviewing footage, reviewing cuts, like how it all comes together. And so I do believe, like, having seen like all of this now, it's like, yeah, there could have been better PG-13 cuts. I mean, maybe if like I like to imagine that in a better world, like they wouldn't have when they split it in half, they would have thought of a different way of splitting it. Like maybe but but just taking what we ended up with on the script level, with that faux climax at the end of part one. Even so, it's like, okay, the PG-13 version could have been edited differently. Like there were other things you could have cut and other things you could have left in, you know? And I feel all sometimes it just comes down to time. Like, there was like an extra 8 months or so to really work on the edits, right? Or to work on the cuts for to work on the director's cut, right? So it's more time to, assess what works, what doesn't work, to reassess. And I think maybe in that regard, having the space between the cuts, maybe that was also a benefit. Maybe they looked at that and we were like, okay, maybe the color grade isn't that great. Can we make it a different color, just to see, like, maybe it'll look better, it'll play better this way, you know?
I can totally agree that they I would imagine that they would have, or that they didn't, that they should have taken some audience reactions to heart, um mainly because like a lot of things like you mentioned where like this feels washed out, this feels dull and monotone, and that's not something I can say about the new editions. Like these ones are definitely a lot more sort of like striking visually, even in terms of the
Mm.
color and texture of the film. And like there's a lot of beigeness in the original cuts, um that 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 I'm glad is gone. Let's leave it at that. I'm glad is gone and forgotten. But let's see here. I agree that these things take time, and he probably maybe didn't have enough time to really make these work. But on my other hand, I remember reading an interview where Zach was going, you know, okay, we would shoot a couple of different takes, and we were like, okay, that one's going for the PG-13 cut, and that one's going for the R cut. Like, why wouldn't you use the best take for both? You know, like that's what sticks in my mind, where it feels like it felt a lot more non-committal, and I think that's probably why the PG-13 cuts came out the way they did, because he didn't really prioritize them. That's the impression I get, that he like, okay, these are just the one-offs, and then we'll be working and fine-tuning the real versions. But like, if these are still coming out, people are still wanting to see them, they should still probably get the better takes too. Okay, you don't have to save the best takes for for R-rated cut just to make the R-rated cut even more an event. You should put those best takes into every single format.
I mean, maybe, but it's also like, I can imagine, well, the dialogue might be different. There is like a lot more profanity, in the R-rated version. So if the best take has like all this profanity that you can't include for PG-13 purposes, it would be like, well, okay, you should probably include the best take of the PG-13 version of the scene. So it's like, so I assume they might have done multiple takes of the PG for the PG-13 cut, but maybe their heart wasn't in it as much because they could tell, okay, this is the real scene, and here's like we're doing like a watered down version. Maybe we don't, do I need to do this? It's annoying, but okay, I guess I have to.
No, 100%. But let's see here. Let's go into the bigger kind of differences. Now, this movie, the part one, House of Blood, begins with, like, I think is a scene that works even better on film than I think on the page. When I read the novelization, I'm like, this is such a great opening scene. This is like a better opening scene than what we got in the theatrical cut, which is like just this droning, monotone, not monotone, sorry, droning. But the words itself feel monotone. They just like really bog standard exposition where like, okay, Anthony Hopkins is giving some life to it, but it's still like just the most tediously written exposition where like the mother world conquers and subjugates planets and people are rebelling. Like, okay, that's boring. So you know what, the when I read the novelization, the first chapter is entirely from the point of view of Aris. So like, okay, wow, that's like a huge change. So like in the theatrical cut, Aris is like only like 1.5 scenes, and all we know about him is that he's a grunt and he has a crush on the pretty young farm girl. Okay, and like, okay, so like getting there, like, oh my god, this is like from the get go, you're like, this movie kind of opened up a lot more. Like, okay, not only was this guy important, but he has like a much more richer backstory than you really kind of get the impression of in the theatrical cut. And not only that, but like he's like someone where you kind of want more from him. Like, okay, not from since he has this kind of backstory, like where will this character go that will kind of satisfy and complete that backstory, complete that arc, that journey that starts from there. Like he's a prince who lost his kingdom. Who's lost his family. Like like come on, I want to follow and see where that eventually kind of goes into. So that was like really sort of like exciting to read. And it was exciting to see. I think it's a fantastic opening sequence. I think it gets us into the action a lot more, sort of, immediately. And it kind of sets up the mother world dynamic a lot better than the narration does, because you get the entire deal like off the bat, invading, subjugating, conquering force, fiefdoms that are rebelling, chief fiefdom planets that are rebelling, the whole weird occult sort of magical space warlock shit that's going on in the background. It's all there, and it's all really, really well done. I had a lot of fun with this opening sequence, and I'm glad that it was just as like horrifying in on screen as it was, in the written word. And I actually liked it a little bit better because in the novelization, you get a little bit more of like a catty back and forth with Admiral Noble, while in the film itself, Ed Screen, like he plays it just a little bit more just monotone and like direct, like he like a little more sociopathically in the novel, and there's a little bit more of a banter, evil banter going on. Um, and like, okay, that feels a little bit corny, and I feel like Ed Screen does a really great job just playing it really nonchalant, and that makes it a little bit more menacing. But I know you have some thoughts about this intro, so I'll let you add it.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I need to sort of explain, I think, my feel about prologues in general, and this is something that I'm hoping to delve into, like in an article or something. But um, I think like one of the problems that I have with Hollywood genre movies, especially big budget ones, is that like 9 out of 10 times they open with with a flashback or a voiceover or both that tend to really demystify what's going forward. It's like for the benefit of the audience, it's like I don't know, I suppose it's like they really want to tell you, okay, this is where we're at, this is what the story is, this is like the conflict that's happening. And oftentimes it just gives away, I think, a lot of key plot points or reveals or something that really is not necessary. It's often more for the benefit of the audience, right? So it's like, it's like in The Mummy, you open with the entire backstory of the evil mummy, and then it's like 40 minutes later, like that's when the main characters find out the backstory of this evil mummy. And it's like, it takes away a lot of the mystery, a lot of the discovery that you could make just by like, so for me, it's like a lot of the times these prologues are completely unnecessary, right? You can start the movie from the actual start of the story, and it would make for like better storytelling, and the viewer can infer, like learn a lot of things along the way with the main characters rather than knowing more than they do. So with that in mind, it's like I don't like the voiceover in the theatrical cut, or in the Netflix cut, but I actually kind of like that it just started, okay, the ship is arriving or whatever. Like the story really kicks off right at where it should logically begin. Like I wish like maybe they could have retained some of that, or maybe just you know, begun immediately with like, that shot of Korra on the moon, plowing the field or whatever, without any voiceover, without any like prolonged intro whatsoever. Just, just jump in there and start the story from there. And I like the prologue sequence as a whole, but again, I feel it just introduces way too much stuff up front. Like there's no build up to the arrival of the Mother World forces. Like I like how in the PG-13 cut, okay, you spend time on this small scale. You only know as much as the farmers do, really, of the putting aside the voiceover, but mostly just as much as all the farmers do, right? And then it's like, oh wait, what's that ship? Okay, now it's like, it's building this menace, right? So the bad guys are slowly but surely, the forces of the Mother World, they enter the story. Like there's this gradual build up to them, and I feel that like the power of that build up and everything, a lot of that is negated when you have that prologue and immediately you're like, okay, here's the evil admiral and his second in command, and they're like destroying everything. Like, I mean, the fact that Noble is a guy who has no honor whatsoever and he's just going to murder the hell out of anybody who says no to him, you know you don't have that real you don't have that reveal anymore in the Sindri scenes later. Like, there's a lot of reveal of him as a character, and now it's just kind of redundant. You know what I'm saying? So I like the prologue, but I legitimately don't think it I legitimately think the movie just works better without it in part one. Like, I wouldn't mind if they put it back into part two, and I think I really think it would work much better there because part two already has like a larger focus on Eris. Like some of the moments there in part two with him, I think they it like and, it also fits the fact that you get a lot more backstory from all the other characters in part two. Like, everybody like shares their war. There's that one scene where everybody confesses their war stories, so you get these brief flashbacks into their past, right? Except for Eris, right? And I feel, okay, if you put that prologue right there in the beginning of part two, that would have been a cool way to reintroduce Noble and Cassius. But that also would have been like a way to get like Eris's backstory in there, where I feel in the film where I think it makes more sense in that context because everybody else is getting flashbacks, right? So yeah, I'm of two minds. I just love the fact that there is no voiceover. There's nobody telling you, like stuff. But also, uh, yeah, I wish that sequence were not there.
No, I can understand that. I just feel like if it was in part two, and I feel like part two is just and like especially in the extended cut is just really sort of empty, um, empty feeling. I can understand that, and I totally agree that part two should have more stuff in it. Um, I feel like it probably I don't know. I feel like at that point I think it helps kind of endear us to Aris a lot better and a lot more quicker in that way. Like I kind of like to see like okay, now we're picking up with him sometime later, and he's like now fully sort of enlisted grunt now. He's like been who knows how long he's been there. That kind of stuff. I kind of like seeing that like immediately after. I want like okay, oh now we got back. I just don't feel like the way that his story is partitioned makes that anyway kind of satisfying. I know that sometimes that's is satisfying. We'll see where a character is, and then later on we'll see their backstory, that kind of thing. I just don't think like the way his scenes play out like that's interesting. I think it plays out better chronologically. Just my 2 cents on that. Um, but yeah, part two definitely needed more substance in it, especially after these extended editions.
No, for sure. I mean, and I get that. Because you can really go about these things in different ways, and I think there are some pros and cons to the different approaches. But it's like, but I don't know. I like as a whole though that they restore so much with Eris in part one. Because like I always felt like he and Jimmy just sort of vanish, and I was like, why isn't there at least a scene that explains like where they stand, like where, like I mean, is Eris like it felt that that whole part was completely glossed over, and here it's like okay, there's literally a scene where it's like now they're getting the ship, now they're retrieving that old ship, in part one, and it's like literally the girl like asks, like Sam asks him, okay, so you're with us now, and he says, yes, I am, or it looks that way or something, and I'm just like, yes, thank you. Like that's one of my favorite restorations, just because like we needed a scene like that to get a sense of like what is going on with this character, like what is his purpose going forward, you
No,
know?
100%. And you're right, they do disappear. And I think that's one of the biggest flaws of the theatrical cut is that, this is meant to be like a the entire movie, like a big grand epic, but it just feels very, very small in the extended, I'm sorry, in the PG-13 cut, because you're basically just following like this small group of characters on a small spaceship set, go to a small green screen area or empty or an empty desert area, and then back again for 4 times in a row, you know and
Yeah.
like and it's like, okay, it feels so tiny, like the scope doesn't feel, you don't get the tangible nature of the scope. So just going back to the village again, showing like that they're proactive, that the characters are developing, like that just mean that matters so much. It makes a huge difference. And as you mentioned, the pace works out so well because a a lot of people found part one, the PG-13 edition, very repetitious, and it can feel kind of tedious. I didn't mind part one as much as other people did, but yes, it does feel a little bit lackluster to just kind of like, okay, they go here, they talk with them, they do a little fight scene or a little action scene, they're back on the ship. It feels very, very formulaic, very, very one note.
Yeah.
So going back to, okay, the villagers doing that. Aris is having this little heart to heart with the girl he has a crush on, all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, now things are opening, they're expanding, you're not like contracting in on itself. And even the stuff with like Noble, like, and he only gets a little bit of extra scenes here, not too much outside of the opening prologue. But even stuff like that, I feel just it helps a little bit more. It adds that little garnish on top of it
Hmm.
that just lets it breathe. Okay, yeah, I know, like, oh, it's an extra hour. Okay, good. It needed an extra hour because this is meant to be like a big sweeping space epic. So you know what? Take as much time as you need because that's part and parcel what if I think the genre. It takes a lot from like these kind of big, pulpy, grand, like sort of like space epic novels and comics and media. Like it reminded me a lot of like heavy metal, and I think this one definitely feels a lot more like heavy metal
Haven't
than
seen it, sadly.
well, not that movie, but like the comics are based on as well. You know,
Oh, okay. I didn't
or
even know it was based on a comic. Sorry.
it's based on like an anthology comic series from France. But also 2000 AD, aren't you, a lot of 2000 AD as well, with that kind of sensibility. So like I love the way that sort of escalates here in part one's extended edition. It really works so well. Um,
No, and I think to that point, it really helps to break the film up visually. Like you have a greater variety, in terms of the visual like style, right? Like you go back to the farm, and suddenly it's like you have all of these like Terrence Malick like scenes. You know what I'm saying? Or the potential for that, like all the like all of the natural landscapes uh and I think it's just it really helps to maintain visual interest, right? Because otherwise it's like you're going from like one barren like like world to another barren world, and it's okay, but it sort of doesn't have that same panache, I guess.
oh no, 100%. Again, like especially with the old color grading, the old way the movie looked, it feels so so boring. Like
Yeah.
again, a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people were shocked, like, how could this be a Zack Snyder movie? And like these ones, they capture that sensibility, that vibrancy so much more. The director's cuts, and like, okay, I'm glad we're on this train here. But yeah, I love the way that it just takes its time. I want to take the time with these characters. I think it makes a lot more of the stuff in the third act of the part one pay off a lot better. That now we know more about this, or and like what's at stake. Like
Yes.
I feel like it makes. I think Kai. I love Kai in the original cut. But I love him even more in the extended edition, because not only like, even though I know he's gonna betray them, I feel like we've spent so much more time like seeing these characters together. Even though like their set pieces might not be that much different, we spend so much time like actually like mentally, because you're on this journey with the characters mentally. You're inside the world of the film. Sort of like, okay, even though it's only been like 3 hours, you get the sense that there's more time, because like you keep going back to the village, you keep seeing all these other characters. The relativity of time from you and the screen and the characters themselves, like you get the sense that this has been maybe like days, weeks, even. So you kind of bring that with you to the characters, and I feel like that makes the reveal at the finale right there with Kai betraying them and everything just add that so much more. Like, okay, that has even more of a punch, because we have sort of like seen these people like just maybe not even inherently grow a little more because of the extra stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt that and I have script issues with the faux climax, but I think like I figured out maybe how it could have been less of a problem. And one thing that I like is that, well, it definitely feels like the movie builds better towards it, because like I think Kai does have more interaction with people. Like there's more of a build up there. There's more of a build up with Noble actually like going there. I think they added that extra part about him. They clarified that like, oh, okay, he's taking his personal gunship there. So it's sort of like feels like it builds better towards that point. And I think the fact that like I remember even seeing the theatrical cut, and I wasn't even sure if Kai was dead, but like here it's so much more obvious, because it's like, it's like, oh yeah, his throat is just completely, like
Destroyed.
yeah, destroyed. um and and I could appreciate now, okay, I see this, I can appreciate what you're doing more here, like honestly, in hindsight and just rewatching this, I legitimately think one of the biggest problems with the ending of part one and the PG-13 cut, and really in both cuts, is that they have Noble resurrected in like immediately like the next scene or something. I'm just like, I okay, maybe you could have, like, if he's going to come back, maybe you could have actually spaced that out a bit more, like maybe cut that whole elaborate sequence and either reinstate it at the beginning of part two, or just push it later even into part two, like there, because you don't even need like even nobody even knows he's alive initially among the Veld. Even when they realize, okay, the Mother World is still coming, they're still confused. Okay, I guess even without Noble, they're coming, right? So you could actually push Noble's return like later into the movie, and I think that would have worked just in terms of, you know what I'm saying? Like you wouldn't get that whiplash from his, okay, he's dead. No, wait, he's like alive again.
Yeah, no, it feels like a cat and mouse game for no one really. Like, okay, like is there anything, anything exciting to come from the fact that they think he's dead? No, he just kind of shows up and says, "Aha, I'm alive." Like, okay, like I totally understand what you're saying. I think that the extended cut of part one does try to alleviate that somewhat by having more to his resurrection. Like they're like, I think they have a little bit more business going on with like them plugging him in and then doing surgery stuff, and he's a lot more fucked up, you know, um, in terms of his corpse, than part one had. I think I love the shot where like his teeth are all just completely destroyed.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's a whole thing about teeth now, right?
yes. The bones in general, because they had like one of the primary weapons, and this one Belisarius also has, or like the king also had like these metal bones, femurs.
Oh,
Yeah.
right,
So
right.
they
And
so
yeah, and they're throwing human remains into the engine, right? Into the
yeah.
furnace.
Yeah. So again, I love all that stuff. Again, I love how gnarly the movie is in comparison. I think we should talk about like the added gore, and stuff like that, the added
Oh
violence
yeah.
and blood. I was a little bit. I like, does this really need more blood? But honestly, the way they play it is so over the top and just so
Yep.
chaotic and so colorful. It is, this is fun. This is just fun to see. I had so much fun. Like it reminds me of so much of like Tron Legacy.
Mm.
Where like, when they would like destroy the programs, they would like blast into like little pixels. This looks so much like that, and like this is hilarious. Like they would just shoot someone in the head would sort of disintegrate into like a bright blue or bright orange haze. Like that's amazing. And I think again it keeps it fun. I really had fun with the extended violence in that sense. So no, I don't did I think that again. I think that there is a PG-13 version of this that could dial that down. So it's a nice little fluff there, but like I don't know. I feel like the wrong compromises were made. The wrong compromises were made.
When I think about it, I remember that the action in part 2,
Mhm.
in the PG-13 part 2, I remember the action there, despite the lack of blood, really looked nice. Like, I'm just, like, wondering, did they maybe actually change their, like, approach there a little bit from part 1 to part 2 when it comes to showing the after effects of people getting shot and whatever? Because I just remember in part 1, it was almost distracting how, uh, how bloodless and how, like, how toned down it seemed, whereas in part 2, it really looked kind of yeah, it looked completely, it looked okay. It did not seem to be distracting in the
Well,
same way.
I think that with part two, there was a lot more focus on like the actual kind of choreography of the set pieces. Like you have to like juggle a lot more. Meanwhile, in part one, it's kind of like there's like your basic kind of shoot 'em ups in every action scene, you know. So I
Yeah,
feel like and the fact that you're kind of just seeing people get shot without anything, so it lacks that weight. Well, in part two, there's a lot more going on, like like ships running each other, explosions, all these actors kind of fighting like in the background, foreground, everywhere. I think there's a lot more to it that gives a lot more sort of impact than you're seeing blood and guts and stuff does. So I think that that's what makes it come across a little better because I think that a lot of stuff in part two ends up kind of feeling very balletic, you know, especially stuff with
yeah,
Jimmy and stuff like when the King's gaze is like crashing down. I love that kind of stuff because of the way that everything is framed and the actors kind of move within the environment is really
yeah.
top notch.
No, no, that stuff was cool. Like, I would say the, restoration of the gore and the violence and everything, it really benefits part 1 even, more so in this regard than part 2. Like, I feel, because the action worked quite well in part 2 without, like, all of the, over the top arterial spray, and it looks cool, when you do it like that, where it's not meant to be at all, like, off-putting or whatever, you know? Like I think you can see what they were going for. This sort of over the top, graphic, graphic, I don't know, art style or whatever with all of the violence um, and everything. So in any case, I am happy that it's restored. I'm happy that it's back as a whole. But again, it mostly benefits part 1 rather than part 2, ironically enough.
Well, that's what I call it. Chalice of blood. You know. But okay. Are there any other things that kind of stood out with part one in terms of
The
like the extended cut?
sex, like the
Okay,
sex.
yeah, we're gonna go into that. Oh my god, I like I don't know, man. I feel like Zack Snyder has a secondary career option if he ever wants to pivot. I mean, if he, I would not mind if he did like a guest spot, like with like Bros or something. Come on, because Zach, he has the eye, he has the eye for it. No, but seriously, like this, like I was prepared for it because like the novelizations are very graphic, they don't skimp on like the details, like reading like a torrid romance novel at times in terms of like
Like
the
soft core.
yes, like again, like they don't skimp on it. But so I was prepared for it. But like my God, these last quite some time. Like Zach, we're on minute 4. My God, how long is this sex scene going to go on for? uh, but I again, like I feel like of course that would be easy cut for a PG-13 version. But you know what? There's one thing you can't say, okay, is that um it's a very Zack Snyder thing to be like, this is my pitch for Star Wars, but they've rejected it, so let's add in sex. Like this, I know what I like that the fact that there's sex in it because it just feels like this is definitely someone's personal vision. Because I don't think anyone would be like, what's gonna be a really great, successful franchise, Star Wars with sex in it. I- Star Wars, that family friendly franchise. Let's add sex. Like that's such a personal idea, a personal preference. Like I have to respect it. Like, okay, that's Rebel Moon. You know, and like I think there's like 4 sex scenes throughout the first 2 parts of this thing. Yeah, no, they're insane. They're insane stuff.
Wait, there were 4? I thought there were 3, at
I
least in the movies, because it's like, okay,
I don't.
there's like Quora and Den, there's like Noble and his squid alien thing, whatever, right? Then
Mhm.
there's like Quora and Gunner, but who's the 4th
Oh
one?
no, I must miscounted. I must miscounted.
Uh,
So yeah, no.
uh,
Okay, 3. You're right, 3. Um, but yeah, no. I think that's about it. I think that a lot with part one, outside the big ones we talked about, it's a lot more odds than ends, a lot more banter, a lot more dialogue. But I think that really helps because it just gives you the sense that these characters are kind of bonding with each other. You get to know a little bit more about them. It's a little more flavor. I feel like when the ones that kind of best with this are kind of the blood axes a little bit. I feel like
mm,
the different takes that they have and like this little wording that they use. Um, Kind of helps them a lot more. I think that, Ray Fisher definitely deserved a lot more screen time. I don't know. I think he should have died in part 2. He should have lived until part 2. I don't know why he didn't like it. I don't know. It's
y-
ridiculous to me that he didn't live into part 2. But I feel like just like he gets a little bit more rewarding here and there. I think I don't know. I made me like his character a little bit more. Like, okay, the character was definitely a little bit threadbare, but this is like threadbare plus a quirk or two, and it just endears me to Darian Bloodaxe a lot more. I think it lets Ray Fisher shine just a little bit more, but still a very threadbare plot.
I suppose. I mean, I'm actually kind of glad they didn't bring him back in part 2, because then I was like, what? So you're telling me nobody died in the climax of part 1? Like nobody
Well, I'm not
major,
saying
like
bring
at
him
all?
back, but I'm saying like he shouldn't have died. They should have,
Uh,
he should have died. He should have like continued on to Velt and then died
I-
in part, and died in part 2.
I wonder just how much that was a consequence of them needing to have like a faux climax, like in part 1. Like maybe there was like a version of the script where he was actually around until, very well into that battle, like for Velt. Like one can imagine that that might have been a whole thing there. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah, I will add one more thing about the sex stuff, though. I kind of, well, first of all, I think what I like about the restoration of that stuff is that I could tell that what they were going for in the movie, but never quite achieved, was the idea that the Veld are like horny hobbits.
Right.
Like
You
I mean,
mentioned that, yeah.
yeah, like they were so blatantly based on the hobbits and the Shire, and it was sort of implied that they're like, okay, like we like for the what like let's like like let's have let's do something for the harvest. You got to do this stuff for the harvest or something. And then here it's like Sindri is now just basically, so fuck for the gods, fuck for the fuck for the harvest. Hey, did I say you should? So I like that added detail, and how, okay, it's like I can see here it's like they achieve their the vision is achieved, like the Hobbit subversion in a way. So I really appreciated that, and also there is no longer that weird cut from, like, I don't know, Cora in that bar and then just coming home or whatever. So yeah, like flows so much better. I could have, maybe, I don't know, maybe could have done without the more of the noble octopus stuff, but I imagine there was even more of that in like the novelization, right?
Yeah, a little bit more, yeah. Um,
So actually, like, on that topic, do you remember anything specific, anything major from the novelization that didn't make it into the director's cut?
yes, I'll bring it up. Um, And of course, there is like extended backstories for like the planets. You know, we always like they're visiting this planet, and here's like a little bit of background and history of the planet itself. And so, like, that's something I don't know how you could put that into the visual medium. So I never expected that to make it through. But it's really, really interesting stuff. You know, you can tell they're pulling from the lore books for novelization. Like, okay, here's like your concepts, and here's like the source books, the Bibles of the franchise to use. So you can definitely tell that B. Castro had access to that kind of stuff. But the big thing for me is that Cassius's entire backstory, Noble's assistant, is not even in the movie. Like, that's a shame because I really, really love that character in a novelization. I really did. He's my favorite character. I think that he has such a
Interesting.
great backstory, like great, great introduction in the novelization. And I was really sort of like engaged with like what his character was doing and where it would go. And of course, like I think in the extended, sorry, theatrical cut of part two, I'm like, did he die? Because like it's weird. I don't know if they show him dying. I know that they still blast into it, like, okay, it's implied. But I don't think we see him until the Curse of Forgiveness, the extended cut. So like when I saw it happen, like, oh, it's a shame because like I don't know, I had such, I don't know, I really was really excited for more of that. Like, whatever. So I was at least disappointed that we didn't get a lot of that because it is like a big chunk of like
Hmm.
like of his character and his dynamics of Noble, where like a little bit more of a back and forth between him and Noble, where he's like like they're both sociopaths, um, but Cassius is worried that like Noble might not like the fact that he himself has plans, like, okay, I'm
Mm.
gonna like I have plans to betray Noble, but I know I have, or I'm not, he plans to betray Noble, but like I will always put myself first. But Noble is the kind of guy who always puts himself first too, but he's like my commanding officer, so I'll need to play this smart so that we can either both get what we
Mm.
want, or I'll be able to kind of walk my way out in case if the tide ever turns, against Noble. You know?
Oh, I see. So he was really like more of a he really had a bit more of a, I don't know, like a Machiavellian kind of,
Yes,
I
exactly.
guess,
Like,
thing to him, you know.
we're,
Oh,
he, like,
yeah, that's
go ahead.
interesting because in all cuts of the movies, he just seems to be like kind of like this obsequious, kind of subservient guy
Yeah,
who doesn't really, yeah.
general loyal kind of like background assistant, and it's really great. One of my favorite parts of the novelization where he's like talking to Noble, like, how do I play this? Like I can't, like, I can't play this too much like a toady, but I also can't like be
I
like
can't tip my hand too
yeah,
much.
yeah, exactly. Like, he's like, how do I play? Like, oh, I'll just say it kind of like normal and formally, but not too formally, that kind of thing. I thought that was really interesting for that kind of character. But yeah, I know in the movies you don't really get a lot of that. You don't get any of it, honestly, and it just seems like more like a background player.
You know,
In
I will say this though. Cassius and Noble have what is maybe one of my favorite scenes in the films, which is in part two, where they actually where Cassius pushes back, like when like because there's that moment where Noble realizes that oh shit, Cora is on the ship now. She has
Mhm.
come to us and she is all that matters. And he says like, okay, this is an I've had enough, just like bomb the village now. And Cassius is like, but wait a minute, what about the grain? He's like, oh, the grain doesn't matter anymore. But we have our men down there. He's like, yeah, well, less mouths to feed, do it. And it's like, that scene for some reason, it really just stood out to me because I feel that's the sort of stuff that I sometimes find is missing in a Zack Snyder movie. Like it's like when you need to get to a new plot point, it's like there will be connective character stuff like this that can easily go missing. Like it's like they get Lois Lane aboard like the Kryptonian ship, but you're never really sure like why or how or what was the, like what was like the motivation there or whatever. And like here it's like I'm like, oh yeah, this is great, this makes like a lot of sense, it tells you things about both characters and it explains like, okay, like now like why are they going to bomb it now, okay, now because like you know what I'm saying, it's like it works so well on a character level. And I just loved that exchange. It's very simple, right? But
Mhm.
it's the sort of stuff that I often find Zack Snyder tends to kind of gloss over. Um, which is like, and again, I'm still amazed how that whole, we've talked about this on Twitter, but that whole thing, like where, he didn't cut out
Yeah,
the,
let's make that the own thing, 'cause I feel like that's a good thing to bring up. But
yeah,
just last thing on Cassius, it's like I wonder if there were. I wonder if that scene where Nibble just kind of shoots him had more impact in like a previous draft, or in a source. Like, okay, maybe that's like the culmination. Maybe like he finally figured him out. Like, I can't trust this guy. Because I
mm,
was wondering, like, why would he leave any of his men behind? Like he knows Korra's on his ship. I was like, okay, I've got to leave them all to die. Like, why not bring them with you?
mm,
Why? At least as cannon fodder, bring them with you. You know, to confront Korra. Um, well, whatever. Let's see here. Yes, the thing you're talking about, big point of contention is that in the part one, we both noticed that when they confront the Blood Axes, asking for their help, Korra mentions the fact that the reason why Belt was targeted was because Gunner used Belt's grain to parlay with the Blood Axes in the past. They sold some of the excess, the surplus, to the Blood Axes. And it's a bit weird because that's never brought up. And like, how would she know then? And what does that even have to do with anything? At
it-
that point, because they're not swayed by it at all, really. And then when I read the novelization, in the novelization, when they meet Noble, Noble actually brings it up when he murders Sindri and all that, and when he dealt the first time, and like, oh, okay, so there was a fish for that, and he's that he was not only there for the grain, but he was also there because he was tracking, the Blood Axes, and obviously he picked up the scent, and it got him to Vel. So that's why Korra says that, like, okay, that's a nice thing that the novelization has, and it kind of ties that thread together. So, and the Korra's line makes sense. But so I kind of assumed when we last did this chat about the original cuts that came out, um, that the director's cut would have that line because it's in the novelization. Novelization is based on the original script and so forth. Um, but no, it's not in the director's cut. They don't have that line that Noble was like, oh, he was tracking down the grain and all that. So
yeah,
the line still makes no sense.
yeah, it's just like, okay, if you are going to have, it's like you either need to have both lines, so it adds up. Like, okay, you either need to restore the line where, it turns out like Noble track, you need to restore the Noble's line in the beginning, so it ties into later when they talk with the Blood Axes, or you need to cut the line with the Blood Axes that mentions, that where she accuses them, where she says like, it's because of his business dealings with you that like the Veld are now under attack. So I'm like, okay, you can have one. You need to either have them both in, or you need to have them both out. But like, you have one and you have the other, and it does not. It doesn't make sense. Like, I remember I was watching that. I'm like, wait, why is Cora lying? Like, that was not that's not like why Noble was there. Noble was there because like he was looking for grain. His stocks were low, and he just decided to exploit like these farmers and everything. So you can't like, and nobody, and the way it was played, it was just like nobody, like there, I'm like, wait, does Gunner, why doesn't Gunner get at least like, hey, wait a minute, what are you talking about, or something? So to me, it's amazing. It's really unbelievable that like, Snyder overlooked that again. I mean, honestly, I'm just like, well, all right. I guess I don't know. I'm just like, I'm still amazed by that.
Me too. Like, because a lot of people have said, I've mentioned this, and some people have said, like, maybe she was lying. Maybe the intent is that she is lying. Like, okay,
But
um,
but
that's
they
one
don't play
thing.
it like that,
They don't play it. They don't, because she's like, they don't play like a lie. There's no like a side glance. She's very
Exactly.
convincing. All right. Um, and the fact of the matter is, we have the novelizations. So we know it wasn't a lie at some point. We know they had the idea that it was not a lie. Um, so my guess is, is that yes, they overlooked it. They never caught it. The movies are long, so there's probably a lot of editing tracks to go through. So I can understand why they never caught it or never, but um, I can I have a feeling for why it was changed in the first place. Okay, and the reason that I have is that In the original sort of intention, where like he's there because he's tracking on the grain shipments and all that, it kind of downplays the importance of the grain itself, you know? Whereas
Yeah.
like he's there because he tracked them down, um, and he's following the leads there. So it's like, oh, so it kind of makes it seem like the grain is a pretext, you know,
Mhm.
for like, you know, it's kind of like punishing Felt, you know? But then in part two, you know, you have like, oh, the grain is actually like a strategical asset. So it can't be a pretext. It has to be important. So I think I can feel like, oh, we gotta get rid of that line where it kind of makes it seem like it was a pretext. Um, and then they never caught the secondary line that follows up on it.
I
So I can see that being the case, and he's never caught it.
I I can totally see that. I just wish that, I mean, you're getting a chance to release like the definitive cut. You should have probably like you should have paid attention to this detail, because to me it just stands out like a sore thumb. But I can totally see how, yeah, I think the importance of the grain would be undermined.
Mhm.
And I really like how important the grain actually is in part two. I mean, they really spend all this time like actually, you know, getting the grain, milling it into flour and all of that stuff. Honestly, I got a little confused by the timeline, because I was like, wait a minute, so how many weeks has it been? Or they're saying they're going to come in 5 days, but like how much time is whatever. Anyway, it's just I just love how the grain ultimately they figure out, okay, we can use the grain as like maybe a bartering tool, or we can like and as a shield. They're not going to bomb us from space, which they could easily do if the grain is like hostage, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can really see like that being why they wanted to cut out that context. But other than that, I really like part one's end of the cut. I still not my favorite Zack Snyder thing. I don't think it's one of his greatest stuff, but it has, like most Zack Snyder releases, some great stuff within it. You know, like there is
Yeah.
like I think that he's always like been a master of like set pieces. So, not all of them are great set pieces, but like when he has like a really good one, it's like it's like nothing you haven't seen. Like I really did fall in love with a couple of the little visual moments, the little visual montages in here, or little art pieces in here that I thought really worked well. So let's talk about part two, Curse of Forgiveness. And I have less to say about this. It is a long version of the Scargiver, and it's not better. That's it. That's my
No,
last word.
it's not, and in some cases, I do think it's worse. I really don't think the Hawkshaws add anything. Even like some of the scenes, it's like I really like how in the PG-13 cut, Noble, the moment that transmission with Eris ends, Noble is like, well, it's pretty clear those other guys are dead, and like this guy is a traitor. He just realizes, because okay, so she's there, he's there, and he's we're getting, okay, it's obvious, right? And
Yeah,
here they're like, oh, well, I guess the transmissions from our spies over there were correct or something. I'm like, oh my god, why?
exactly. I feel like with the Hawkshaws, it just adds an extra complication. It feels like we have. I don't know how when you have like these two films as they are. I don't know how you needed to add more. I feel like this is like I feel like the Hawkshaws were added after they realized they needed to split this up into two movies. And like, okay, but like we only have like 40 minutes of plot for part two. Um, like because we can't cut off part one until like they're all gathered, and then like but we only have like 40 minutes. What do we do? Oh, let's just add like some scenes of some guys, and then don't worry about it. That's how I feel like the Hawk Show is like, oh, for like 15 minutes in total of just like them looking through binoculars and writing stuff
Yes,
down.
it is so redundant. It's like, because it was like, I think it was like two or three scenes almost in a row where they're like, okay, looking, okay, start the transmission. Okay, I'm looking, okay, start the transmission. And it's like the third time, okay, start the transmission. Wait,
And
what?
then yeah, exactly. And Jimmy gets them. And like I was actually disappointed because like I was expecting more because after part one, I'm like, oh, okay, like this is just adding more content, expanding the scale and scope of the story, expanding the characters a little bit better. So I was disappointed when part 1 ended, the extended cut, when we see that the Hawkshaws like start following them, stalking them, and like, oh wow, that's new. And I wonder how that's gonna play out. Will they be like part of an extended sequence or something like that? And then then we see part 2, and like, oh, they're just there to give Jimmy something to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, no, like you didn't. It worked so much better just without all of that. And you know,
Yes.
and you kind of start wondering, well, wait a minute, why did it take Jimmy so long to take them out anyway? Like he waited until I think the last possible moment, you know. And it's just like no, it flows. It's like better paced without any of that stuff to pad. It just feels like padding at that
No,
point.
no, yeah, exactly. It feels like it's stalling for time. Now, the reason why the Scar Giver worked for me is because it's the climax. So you get like you don't hit the ground running, but you kind of hit the ground running. Like, okay, like we're on belt. Here's our plan. We have to get this shit done. Oh shit, they're back. Oh crap, the battle started, and it's like it's like 2 hours, right? But it's like clip, clip, clip. It's just clipping at a great pace. You know, like
It
it's going.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like 2 hours.
No,
I think
I watched it in theaters. You know, I went to like the fan premiere in New York, and I had a great time in theaters. Like, oh my god, this is really fun. You're carried along by the momentum, by the energy. This
yeah,
doesn't have that, unfortunately.
yeah. It loses more than it gains. I think. I mean, I like some of the um maybe, like, I think, like, I enjoyed a bit more of the character scenes. I think, like, there's, like, more of the, of our team, like, hanging out with the villagers. Maybe just a bit more of that I could have used, but as a whole, it's just, like, it's weird how it has, like, the opposite problem now, right? Like, it was, like, rather part 1 was cut down way too much, right? Like, I mean, part 1 needed like a lot of these extensions, whereas like part 2, it's like, no, wait a minute, this was really neat, very, very tight, and it like worked like so well. And now it's just you add all this stuff on top of it, and it's sort of, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, I like the addition of that Rue Kali stuff, especially because that, I mean, it's just one scene, I think, but they also mention it more. Like there's more discussion of the, like, of the trapped goddess or whatever she is. Like it sort of plays a bit more into the story. So, and it brings back that notion of forgiveness towards the end. I think that's the stuff that I think, that I would agree. Okay, I like that you put that back in. Um, but yeah, but maybe could have done with even less Belisarius. Honestly, it's like, because I don't know, like, if all of those, like, additional flashbacks kind of, like, I think they worked in part 1. And part 2, it's just like, yeah, yeah,
No, yeah, I agree. I feel like just the more odds and ends are appreciated, but then I feel like a lot of them ended up being like perfunctory. Like, oh, this is just the little bit we need to make the little payoff work better. Like when I saw part two's original cut, right? When Nemesis dies, okay, and like the little kid tries to grab her like her sword and all that kind of stuff, her lightsaber, right?
yeah,
I felt like, okay, who's that little kid? Okay, oh, it's probably gonna be a little bit. There's probably gonna be someone that she kind of connects with and bonds with in the extended cut, and then in this one, like, yeah, she beats the kid, but it's like for 5 seconds, you know? But like,
uh,
okay, so like so yeah, it sets it up, but like, I
no, no,
mean,
no. Well, I think
it's not that weighty still.
well, no, I think they did add a bit, but she does meet him in the
Exactly.
theatrical cut. It
I
was just.
mean, it wasn't. I feel like it's given a little more emphasis here.
Yeah, that's true. I think there were some extra, like, bits there, I always enjoyed, though, how economical that was. I think, like, I got,
I
like,
know.
I
I
just
know.
got enough of that, in the
I feel like
PG-13 version.
there's like barely anything there in the PG-13 cut of that. Like I feel like
Uh,
if you're gonna do that, it has to be earned. I need to be emotional. I need to care about it. So it needs to actually be something that you're digging into, that you're planting a flag into, you know?
yeah.
So and like I feel like you might as well have not added anything and more here because it's basically the same. It's a horizontal move in terms of addition. But yeah, you're right. The Kali stuff, which they added extra stuff into with part one, in this part two, like why wasn't this in the theatrical cut part two? Because like it's such a great moment, and like okay, like that's something I was wondering because we know since like the original versions like that the Kali are sentient, okay, and that they're being enslaved. Um, so like I was always wondering like why wasn't there a little bit more there before she blows it up? It just kind of feels kind of weird. So obviously this was very necessary. Okay, it gives a more emotional weight. It gives the entire proceedings a little bit more somber like tones to it. But like it's not like something that was so much that you couldn't have had it in the theatrical cut, you know. So that's a
Mm,
shame. And the one thing I like is I did like the epilogue. Okay, I feel like the movie and the original versions ended really awkwardly and like really let's just get the fuck out of here. You know, oh like
like
the princess,
abruptly.
yeah, abruptly like the princess is still alive. We gotta go find her. Okay, the end. You know, like okay, we're out of here. Um, but so having a little epilogue, I feel like oh, the epilogue could have been better itself because like okay, we know that Billy Cyrus is after. We know that since the beginning of the fucking movie. He knows that she's alive, so of course he'll be after her. We don't really learn anything, but just having an extra little button to end the movie on, I think
Yeah,
does
like a
help.
bookend,
Bill
like a
Bookend, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I guess, but I don't know. I still feel like the movie could have used less Belisarius, like as a whole. Like I think I got the gist, sort of what's going to be like of what's going on there, just from what that PG-13 cut like had. Like I think there was just enough of him there. Whereas here, it's like though I will say I did appreciate like the how they delved a bit more into his history. I will say that, like how here you find out, okay, he was a military commander, and then I think the king realized he was growing too powerful, or he had a. I'm not even sure though why the king kicked him out. I never
well,
quite understood what that meant.
he had been too vicious, like he was
Hmm.
he was he was too sadistic.
Hmm.
Like
Like,
saying how like yeah, eventually like he was berating him for like taking things too far with like a certain conquest.
but wasn't there like some sort of vision or whatever, or something? Like I was like, wait, is there like a prophecy that he was told or whatever? Because I don't know, the dialogue there just confused me.
I
But
mean, he definitely thinks that like the princess is the fulfillment of the prophecy. So yeah,
okay, I mean,
but
yeah, so maybe, yeah, but in any
I
case,
think you're definitely conflating the two a little bit.
maybe, yeah, I got, I just remember being a little, but okay, yeah, so but we sort of see like how he actually became more powerful in the Senate.
Which is I like that. I like that as well. I just think it's a little bit funny to be like he became a powerful senator, like a politician, and he's like, "You fuck those guys." I mean, like, oh yeah, what a great orator, like he's definitely wielding political, strategic, wit here. It's so awkward. I mean, you might as well not have like had him say anything. Like he's basically muted anyway. So yeah, I don't think they should have had. You should have heard what he said because it's so corny and so silly. It ruins the scene. Like I feel like, oh, is this Empire stupid? Is the kind of thing like basically
I
corrupting the Empire.
I don't know. I've sort of seen occasionally, like on TV, like what political discourse happens sometimes in the big, like houses and whatever. And I'm like, it's not. Honestly, like they can get pretty stupid. I think, so so I don't know, but I just enjoyed the idea that, like, okay, so he was apparently growing too powerful as a military commander, and the king, like, made a I think, like, he just made a grave miscalculation by putting him into the Senate, by like, by turning him into a senator, so he grew even more powerful. And that sort of creates that, that kind of tragic, what do you call it? Like, um, like that sort of notion of tragic fate, like you try to avoid, like you try to change
Yeah.
your fate and you end up causing it. I kind of felt like that's kind of what they were going for there.
Yeah, no, I definitely there's this giant Greece Roman mythological bent with these people, and I did like that a lot, especially when we get to the flashback of the king's death, which I felt was like really lame in the theatrical cut because one, it's like, oh, it's very much meant to be like Julius Caesar, right? But in the
Yes.
theatrical cut, right, Belisarius stabs him once and that's it. Like, oh, that's not like, so you did the whole Julius Caesar thing, but you only get stabbed once. Like, that's not Julius Caesar. This is really lame. And so like the extended cut, like I'm like, of course they're gonna say for the extended cut. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And then like he said the curse of forgiveness, he gets like stabbed like a billion times. Amazing. Like, yes,
Yeah, that
this is
was
exactly what I
vicious.
wanted.
Yeah, that was really vicious, like, I have to say, and, it was already an impressive sequence because of, like, all the violin people who are I was like, "Huh, so what's up with the violin people or whatever, and why are they but whatever, they're just, like, playing for effect, so, okay. So, so you have to wonder, did they choreograph that, like, "Okay, we're gonna start stabbing the king, and you guys better play, like, the music even louder," or something? Um, but yeah, I liked that. I feel that definitely benefits from the R-rated gore and everything, and like it's not as it's not neutered. It's like, okay, yeah, this is it. This is the right amount of, I don't know, like viscera.
No, 100%. But yeah, other than that, I really don't have much else to say about Curse of Forgiveness. Because I did like Scargiver a lot more. In my opinion, the best way to watch these would be extended cut of part one, and then just the actual cut of part two. You
But
know,
with the gore added in.
of course, if only we could do that.
Yeah, yeah, like look, I would honestly love to do like a fan cut of both editions, like if they ever were to come out on Blu-ray or something.
Oh no, definitely. Like, just to see what you could get away with. You know.
Yeah, like I'm imagining, okay, maybe the best cut of this two-part, because you can't change some things at the script level, but if like the best iteration of this two-part film would be maybe like it would have like a running time of maybe like 5 to 5.5 hours, like 245 for or 245 to 3 hours for part one, and then maybe two to like maybe like 230 for part two. Just like take like the best bits, but also keep it tight, cut out some stuff that's like, and just make it as consistent as possible.
Mhm.
Like that's what I would love to do.
No, no. Yeah, I feel like that would probably, you know, I feel like there's a definitive version of this that is still elusive,
Yeah.
But overall, I enjoyed these films like as a whole. Like I still think they're like 6, 7 out of 10 only, but there is a lot more here, and I hope that this ridiculous release plan hasn't like strangled the franchise in the crib. You know, I really hope not. I feel like it might have because other than
Mm.
people who were waiting for Rebel Moon Part One and Two to get the extended editions, you kind of shot your wad with like the general public.
Uh Maybe, I don't know. I've sort of been, I remember thinking that like, okay, maybe I was doubtful, like I think already earlier this year that it would go on in any way, and then it's like, oh, okay, well apparently there is something like a video game in the works, apparently.
Well, there was, but I'm not sure if there's a new one. But also the audio play on Audible or something like that. They call it the
Oh.
Senate Shop, which is really fun because like in about the first Jimmy, and then they kind of set it up here, which is really cool. I actually really like that because the Seneschal is about the very first Jimmy model, right? And then and then I forget, it's either part one or part two. Um, Jimmy, one of his new scenes, he's like remembering like I have memories of a princess. She called me her seneschal, and like and kind of okay, so maybe he has source memories of like the original Jimmy. Maybe we'll get more context for that.
Oh,
If we
that would be that would be cool. Like,
it's already out. Like apparently the first two episodes are out of that out for that audio play. I kind of want to hear them. So that's cool. Like again, I thought that was a nice way to like allude to the extended universe of this already without being too obvious. It adds a little bit
Mm.
more flavor. It adds more like what kind of creature is Jimmy? Like what is in his mind? And like, okay, you can get more by listening to the audio play. So that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if we don't get any more films, they could try continuing it in another medium, you know,
Mhm.
like maybe it'll be something animated because animation is, as a whole, I think it's kind of cheaper, like it's more, I think would allow them to tell like more story. Maybe they could do an animated series or they could keep doing the video game thing. So, like right now, I'm a bit more positive than I was before. I will say that I think I kind of get Netflix's release plan because they really did like, I did like a whole study of their running time policy, and it's fascinating because like in 2023, like 80% over 80% of the original films they released were under 2 hours. You
Mhm.
know, like they're so I would say definitely like there were all of these like considerations for like running time and for quadrant. Like it's just it's kind of sad. I feel like if Snyder had managed to make these, back in, I don't know, like 2020, 2021, instead of like Army of the Dead, then I don't think the PG-13 cuts would have existed. Like there was a whole policy shift, I think, with Netflix in mid 2022 when it came to how they, approach their original films. So I kind of feel like initially when Snyder arrived there, it was a slightly different climate, you know?
Mhm.
And it's sort of, it is what it is now, unfortunately. Like, so I suppose like had it been made back then, it would have maybe we would have even gotten like one extra, like 1 4-hour movie. Who knows?
Yeah, no, that would have been the dream. I think that would probably be the best way of watching these because I feel like there's still just some things that keep these from being like really good or their perfect version.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's to whatever future the franchise holds. I would still love to see these continue as maybe novels. I think that would be a great avenue for these.
Oh yeah.
Um, but you know what? I'm glad we finally got to see the full versions of these. In any case, some better than the others, but yeah, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, average. But you,
I think that's about fair. I'm more in the 7 out of 10, like as a whole. I think I would probably like I like to imagine. Okay, what would the I think maybe like like if I imagine like the definitive cuts that are in my head, I would probably give it like a B. You know what I mean?
mhm, yeah,
Yeah.
'cause you can see it in the marble.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm happy that at least like we got what we got out of it. It really is it's more like you can see the potential for what this could be in the future even if we never get that. And it's interesting. I would never I really think um maybe I don't know if the reception would have been a whole lot better had the R-rated cuts come out, but as a whole, I think critics were overly like just too overly negative. I mean, part two especially. I was just like, what really? Like, I mean, even less positive reviews on Rotten Tomato. I mean, I know like the score doesn't mean anything, but really, like, I was like, such a massive improvement on part one, and yet like it has an even lower like score. It just like yeah, did not deserve that in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. Let's see here. Let's see. All right,
Shall
so
we?
yes,
Trap?
let's go into trap. The next the latest movie from auteur M Night Shyamalan. Uh, And I have to say, I love the trap more than I thought I would. At a certain point in the movie, I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen anymore. How long is this movie? What time is it? I'm not gonna. If I check the time, will I ruin what might be happening for myself? Because right now, this movie could go on for like another hour, and I wouldn't be able to tell. It's that kind of film where it's like it kind of you go in expecting one thing, and bit by bit, it feeds into perceptions until it just hits you in the face with like a really great sort of side swipe, and you're left like dangling. And I think this is both M. Night Shyamalan's funniest, goofiest cornball movie, but also I have to say I think it's one of his most tense and like suspenseful movies as well. What about you?
I think it's a masterpiece. I'm like, I okay. I've only seen it once, and repeat viewings have a, they might change my perceptions. They might change my impressions. But my first impression after coming out of the theater was, oh wow, it's the best movie since Glass, and maybe the most confident movie in maybe just in terms of its visual language, maybe since The Village. I thought it is great. It is awesome. I'm like so I was so you know it's like watching it. It's like there were times when I was clapping, times when I was just like laughing out loud because it really is a riot. And I legitimately find that I find that this is the first movie the first it's really like the first time that Shyamalan really did a Hitchcockian film. Like I remember there was that whole, I think magazine cover that proclaimed him like the next Spielberg, and then somebody else called him the next Hitchcock. And I'm like, okay, I think this is the first truly Hitchcockian Shyamalan film. And it is great. It is like I don't agree with what a lot of critics are complaining about.
We'll deal with them in a second, but I
Yeah.
definitely agree. Like this is the kind of movie. Okay, I think that you're definitely right. M. Night, he mostly works in genre, like in straight genre. You know, like there's always some sort of trapping to it. While this one, it is like for the most part a very straightforward thriller. You know, like there's no frills to it really. And yeah, you would expect it's like, okay, here's a scenario, and then here's the tension. Now let's let it roll. It's a very, as you mentioned, Hitchcockian thing where like we know we're going through the layout with um Hartnett's character. We're going through everything. We're seeing the timing of everything. It's for the most part, it's kind of almost real time, which I think like obviously it's not, but like concerts are only like about 2 3 hours. So the fact is that the most of this movie is like at the concert and everything like that. It's it sort of adds to it because like, okay, how long has he been gone? How long has been going? It's like, how much time does he have? It's you're feeling it because like it's almost lining up with what your experience watching it. So you're like you're in the ticking clock seat with him. Um, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I really thought it handled it so well. I think that um it's definitely his funniest. I think that a lot of people are like, "Is this meant to be funny?" No, it's definitely meant to be funny. It's like a comedy of errors.
The
It's
yes.
it's so
The
straightforwardly like a farcical for most of it, and I don't know how people get like confused by that. Um,
I can tell you why. And this has a lot to do with Shyamalan's approach to tone. And there's obviously a much bigger discussion to be had about tone in general, but I think that Shyamalan is great at tone. He's great at also at shifting tones, at balancing different tones. And as a whole, I like to describe his tone as post-ironic, which is to say that you're often not sure whether you're supposed to take a given scene seriously or you're supposed to find it funny. Like is it like, it's like, what is its attitude about itself? Is it like being serious, or is it like, saying everything with a bit of a wink or whatever? And you often can't tell. And so I think people have that difficulty where there are points where it's like, oh, okay, this is like a straight up horror film. you might watch the opening scene of The Happening, and you might think, okay, this is supposed to be straight up, like pure horror or something. It's supposed to be scary, and then the movie is actually trying to be funny for a good amount of the running time, and people are like, "What? This isn't horror? I don't get it. Boo! This sucks." So I often find like, yeah, like because the film shifts like its tonality. Like at some points, maybe you're supposed to laugh. At some points, you're not supposed to laugh, and at other points, maybe you could both of those are valid, right? And so I think people are used to like very direct signifiers of when, okay, now we can laugh. This guy is making fun of everything. This guy's like telling us, it's like we're supposed to be like laughing. Like in a Marvel movie, like somebody will have this like self-reflexive dialogue about how ridiculous everything is. So and the audience is like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, we're not supposed to take this corny dialogue seriously at all, or something. And Shyamalan doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't. But yeah, no. I feel like most of the stuff, especially when things really get going, when things really get rolling, the audience I was in, um, they started really fitting into it. They started really feeling the vibe of the movie a lot more. I don't think that for like the first two acts there was like any scene that did not elicit some kind of laughter. You know,
Yeah.
uh, like it's very much like it's a goofball comedy. It's like at first you're like, and I feel like the trailers did a great job hiding that. The trailers, of course, they have the thing with like the guy who says like, "It's just a trap." Chop, chop, chop. Jamie,
Yeah.
the character, and that's the only really comedic part, and the rest is like, it's very kind of like very kind of strict kind of trailer cut, and I think really great job of obscuring the aspect that it's a comedy. It is. It's like, of course, you can go two ways with this premise. A serial killer
Yeah.
trapped in like a place where there's like security everywhere, and they're looking for him. And how can you get past security? You can either make that like the most tense film imaginable, or like that is in itself like a really absurd premise, and M Night knows that, and it's an
Yes.
absurd premise. Like, okay, that would be a really like a really kind of, oh my god, I'm screwed kind of moment, right? Let's have fun with that,
Yes.
because the film is just like him trying anything, everything to try to get out. Like he's up for anything. Like he has no limits onto what he'll suspect, and I think that leads to some really amazing moments because like you are hit with like, oh, okay, this guy is desperate, you know, this guy is panicking. Um, so in that scenario, like, okay, he'll like suggest this. It's like, like, you know what, it's worth a try. So I think that really gets
Yeah.
the audience on Hartnett's side for most of it. I think that again, that's something that M Night intends. Like he kind of intends, like, okay, he's even though he's like a horrible serial killer, he's still kind of the underdog in this scenario. So I
Yeah,
think,
and he's kind of charming too. Like, I
yeah,
mean, just like the way those scenes play out, there's that real sense that, like, this guy is pretty charming. And then, little by little, you start to see him perform like, more and more horrible acts, right? Like when it's just like, and you don't quite see that coming even. I mean, when he just pushes a woman, like down the stairs, and it's just like, and I think like the fact that it was really funny up until that point, that just so disarms you. That just magnifies the horror of what he's capable of. Like
yeah, no, I no, I definitely agree. Sorry, like I sometimes can't find the mute button. Like, anyway, unmute. I mean, but I know 100%, and I think that that's what makes the last act like hit you like a freaking hurricane. Okay, because um, I think this has like the inverse of like what you see so many times. You see like a movie when they like their like plot switches, like From Dusk Till Dawn, or like any movies like that, where like you kind of go in expecting a certain kind of movie, like Abigail. Like,
Yeah.
they'll play along for the first act, and then like the next two acts, like, okay, this is the real movie. This kind of inverts that a little bit. Where, like, you're having fun for like the first two acts, and then like the last 30-40 minutes, like, this is legitimately terrifying this is M Night's some M Night's most claustrophobic and
Yes.
isolated like framing and set pieces. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. It is just thrilling. I'm captivated. I'm like on the edge of my seats. It's something where I feel I think he brings a lot of what happened in like let's see here what was it called? What was that? The show
Oh, a servant.
Servant. Yeah, I was gonna say Savant. I don't know why. Servant. He brings a lot of Servant because Servant had this very kind of ordered, strict kind of framing, like very, very minute, very, very kind of piece by piece by piece. It worked for that show a lot, and I think he does bring a lot of visual style here, a lot of the editing style here, especially because I think that we're meant to see like obviously. Well, part of Hartnett's whole thing is that he's very orderly. He can compartmentalize.
Yeah, he's like he's like I think in part he might be based on a character from Dial M for Murder, because in that Hitchcock film, like the main villain, he hires a guy to kill his wife, but he's also a guy who has such an obsession with order. It's like there's a whole like one of the best like scenes in the film is when I think like he and the killer, the guy he hires, they've had like this extensive conversation, and I think they accidentally like moved the rug or something while they were walking and talking in this room. So it's like they exit and then but the scene like lingers in the room, and I think the guy comes back in and he has to put the carpet back into the right place. Like he's that obsessed with keeping everything like neat and tidy and clean. um and I could swear like at least a couple of moments with Cooper in this movie were almost like a shout out to that. Like I think he has to correct a towel or something on the wall. And it was amazing.
Oh man. So let's see here. I feel like there's a lot of people don't really understand like what it's going for. I know there's a lot of people have said about a lot of weird things about this film and M Night in general recently. It always happens whenever he gets a new movie out. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, M Night is his own brand. He's always been his own brand, really, but like he is his own brand. So a lot of people are taking like very old kind of ways of being in dialogue with his films and not like and they're like they feel stagnated or like they feel like they're still stuck in 2004 when it comes to talking about M Night Shyamalan. We're like, yes, we get it. Okay, we get it. We get it. We get it. What's the point? What's the purpose? That's not a useful criticism. Oh, his dialogue is weird. Okay, it's been weird. It's always been weird.
Yeah.
Take any dialogue that Bruce Willis says in The Sixth Sense, and imagine anyone else who is not as talented as Bruce Willis saying it, and you
Yeah.
realize how weird that is. Okay,
I'm always like people are like, oh, like this person has like this director hasn't heard people talk. Oh, the dialogue is unnaturalistic. I'm like, I'm sorry. Can you point out any maybe non-documentary fiction film that has what you would call naturalistic dialogue? Like, how do we define naturalistic dialogue? People don't speak in movies the way we speak in real life. They just don't. They don't repeat themselves. They don't pause. And you know what I'm saying? It is such a weird, completely bogus criticism. You know?
no, definitely, 100%. Like I don't see where people are coming from with that. Like I understand, like if you don't like the dialogue, that's fine, But like, oh no, the movie, this is a failing on his part, and it's intentional. Like, oh, it's meant to be intentional. That you're being an apologist. That like, no, it's intentional. Like these are really weird, corny lines. Like even Emma himself doesn't speak like that. He's like a regular chill dude. Okay,
Yeah.
so so like it's clear like this is just he has like it's like it's an affectation, and I think that it really does help. I
I
feel
I
it's like
mean, yeah,
stage play.
it is. Like, I mean, I would say the dialogue that he writes, and sometimes I admit it can be kind of clunky to me. Like even like I think Old kind of had a lot of stuff that I'm just like, okay, I wish I hadn't heard that. But a lot of the times his dialogue is perfect for the movie that he's making, for the story that he is telling. and like how like and I mean it is like nobody criticizes Joss Whedon, for example, for unnatural dialogue. Like everybody knows, okay, people don't talk like that. That's a you watch a Joss Whedon movie, you know what kind of dialogue you can expect, you know. And I just feel like people don't really, again, they don't see the intention or the intentionality maybe
Yeah, exactly.
of Shyamalan speak or whatever.
Like you just say they don't like it. I think like okay, now let's examine why you don't like it because it's not the type of film that you like, and that kind of thing. It's so easy to like actually talk about these movies in a way that is worthwhile, that examines like your own sort of preferences. But like, oh no, this is wrong. That's just like what kind of criticism is that, or this is illogical, or like what, like, hey, who cares, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it works. Like for like for what this film is doing, I'm like, well, this like works like so well. I'm just like, what I don't get like the complaint, you know? It's like, I mean, I know there are thrillers, for example, that don't work, but I feel like, well, everything that this movie is doing, it just feels like it works uh it works for what it's doing. You know what I'm saying?
No, no,
And
definitely. And like if I had to say a couple of things, like I at least for like until like the last act, there were I kind of was hoping for more of like like a really kind of of a more of a really bold visual sense. I feel
yes.
because
Yes.
like if old and Knock at a Cabin, like some of those shots, some of the framing, like they're really great. Like they're really kind of
Yes.
visually and
L
visually creative and stunning. And
Yeah, yeah,
I rewatched Old last night. Like that movie is like a fucking feast for the eyes. My God.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of formalist, right? Like, you
Yeah.
sort of expect an emphasis on the form, on the style, like, you expect shots that, like, draw attention to themselves with their craft, right?
Mhm.
And I remember, yeah, like watching the first half of the movie, and I was like a little bit, it feels like a bit more subdued. Like it feels like more
Yeah.
basic. Like you see, yeah, it's got some good staging. Like the way the camera moves when he's like looking around, and this sort of the space. It's like it does like create some sense of claustrophobia in a way. But then it's like, but it wasn't like all of that, it wasn't like attracting attention to itself all that much. And then suddenly it's like when they move to the second, it's like you see, oh, that's it. Like you needed that contrast. Like the first half just feels so kind of,
Exactly.
yeah, like so straightforward, and then suddenly it feels like not very, it doesn't attract attention to itself, and then you move to the second half of the movie and suddenly it's like so aggressive, and like and,
Yes.
and you almost have like whiplash, and it's great.
Because like I feel like in the first half, right? When it's all about structure, it's all about like, oh, he is in a cage. There are four walls. How does he get out? So there's not a
Yeah.
lot to do there. Like you're kind of trapped in there. Okay, like everything has to be confined. Everything has to play by these rules. And then by the time that switch happens, it's like, okay, he is out, he is moving, he is thinking, he has opportunities, chances, motive, time. So like that you can get a lot more fun with it because now he is loose. It shows that he is uncaged, he is unfettered. Like what can he play with? There's so many more options. So that's feel like it sort of gives that sense that like, oh,
Mm.
okay, it leaves you more uneasy, it leaves you more unsure. Rather like in the first half, it's like everything is more straightforward. You kind
Yeah,
of expect.
yeah, it's more
You're secure.
straightforward, but yeah, but also, yeah, but I think it also translates, the sense of the character, right? Like
Yeah.
because even though it's like the guy is confined in a way, but he's also in control. Like he's in control of the narrative. He's sort of our point of view character, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of feel what's really cool is how, and now I want to delve a bit into the spoiler territory, if that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, so to me, like really, the film, at least on some level, it's kind of about space. It's like about the interaction between different spaces and how boundaries between them can get really, how the boundaries can come apart, right? So like personal space and public space and internal and external, right? And so for me, like really, like I just love that point, right, where he you know, like it's like initially they show you Lady Raven almost as a like, you know, you're always seeing her from a distance, like
Mm.
from, you know, up on screen. She's not really a character. She's more like this sort of element almost in the background. And then slowly you start getting closer and closer, and you still have no real idea of this. You don't have no real sense of this person. Then suddenly, you know, there's that point where for I think a lot of people like point out as like, oh, this is like so absurd, the movie falls, and I'm like, no, 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 this is awesome. So he, right, like he takes her, he for a private conversation into
Oh, that
her.
oh my god, I love that. I love that scene so much because before that, well, several times in the movie, you see he's thinking about several options. Like he'll
Yeah.
be in a room, he'll make like three glances, we'll get the cuts to them, and you'll be like, okay, you see that the wheels turning. Hartnett has some amazing face acting in this film because like
Yes.
you can see the wheels turning, the cogs moving, like, and you're like I feel like that puts you in his shoes. It makes you go along for his ride, basically. Like, okay, out of these, what will he do? How will he use that? Will that work? You're going along with him. You're thinking along with him. It invites you to do so. And so when that scene happens, you get like a couple different options, honestly, leading up to that scene. Like, like me and my brother were like thinking like, oh, is the tattoos? It can be the tattoos, or is he gonna slip like some whole milk to the thinker?
Yeah.
What's he gonna do? Or is he gonna mess with her asthma pump? Like,
Yes, I
so
was wondering about that because they showed her asthma, like, you know, like her inhaler, right? And I was like, oh man, is he gonna do something to the inhalers?
yes, but it gives you like all these options and leading up to that, like what is he gonna do? And then that scene is amazing because like it 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 knocked me over. Like, what is he doing? Like, what? Like, holy shit!
Yeah.
I was floored. I was floored.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Okay.
finish your thought.
No, but what I love is like how, right, like he invades her personal space, and he gets actually like, and you know, and that boundary starts to come down when he just reveals exactly who he is, right? And he's sort of, and at that point, it's like she becomes our protagonist suddenly, and it's like the visual style of the movie switches around completely, you know, like in accordance with that. And I thought that was such a great way of you know, of like changing things up, but also just of going forward with that idea of space, because now we know her more. We know her on a more personal level. Now we start to see everything from her perspective. And
Right.
suddenly it's like, yeah, and they're in the limo, and it's all suddenly so like cramped, and it's like, you know, so tense, right? And then like she
Yeah.
gets, but and then she starts to go against like his control, and so he starts losing control, right? Like, so now the wall is coming down even further, right? Like she's like taking the reins of the narrative, right? And and now she's invading his personal life and his personal space, right? So right, so she gets into their home, and it's like, whoa, the camera is like suddenly, you know, it's just like there's that point where it like twirls around her or something. Like she looks
Yes.
at the whole house, and it's like there's this sense of like disorientation, and everything is like so, you know, it was
Yes.
like amazing.
Yeah, it was
It-
amazing, and and I feel like that kind of pan around the house is basically like it flips it on its head. It well inverts it. Honestly, he's no longer trapped at her concert. She's trapped in his house, and so like
yeah,
what he was thinking about, like, what are his options? He's looking around, he's looking everywhere. That's her. Like, what are her options?
yeah,
Like what can she do? How does she play it? And I think that's so smart. That's really clever. And I have to say, a lot of people are saying like, and I'll say it, I think that Suleika Shyamalan does a good job. Like, people are like, I don't say she's fantastic. She's not an actress. She's a good
yeah,
songwriter. But honestly, for like what the role is, I feel like she does a good job. She doesn't, I won't say hold her own, but I think that she does capture like that kind of vulnerable naivete, and
I,
that kind of wounded nature
yeah,
of like what the character is. I really enjoyed it. I thought she was like, she goes from like from being like very kind of like like floaty, floaty, and then like something like that scene, her reactions, her expressions in the bathroom are like, oh god, man, god, she's doing a
yeah,
really good job.
she is,
Um,
yeah,
and so people are saying crying, oh, why did he cast his daughter? Like blah blah blah. Like one, I'd be like that if her if she was like bad or actively making the movie worse. But no, she's good. Like, so here's my favorite thing. Someone when I follow, it's like, oh, but she's okay in the movie. Like, oh, but you don't get like the Sixth Sense with just good. Like, okay, but like, that Haley Joel Osment is a freak. He's a freak of nature. No child actor has ever been that good. Okay, as Haley Joel Osment. Other than like Spencer Treat Clark, and them too are the only good or like the best child actors of like their generation. So okay, that's one thing, and two, it's been like 30 years since The Sixth Sense. Get over it, okay? Get
Yeah.
over it. Like I know I hope that he makes something as good as The Sixth Sense. I think he has. I loved Old. I think Old's a masterpiece. I think Black in the Cab is a masterpiece. I think that Class is a masterpiece. Okay, I love those films. Okay, so in
Yeah.
my mind, you're like, oh my god, he hasn't made anything good since Sixth Sense. That's not apply to me.
No.
I hope that he makes something
uh,
as commercially viable as Sixth Sense.
that's difficult. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's
feel,
exactly.
look, I would say this. I find there are some movies that are like, I would classify them as, okay, this is a Hollywood movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Like, no offense to The Sixth Sense, but I find that is a Hollywood movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It's not as, esoteric or idiosyncratic as his other films. It doesn't have his approach to tone, his specific brand of post irony. Okay,
Mhm.
like for me, Trap is like a perfect balance. It is a Shyamalan movie, but it also can work as a commercial film. Like, I totally see how, yeah, everybody's like saying this is the most entertaining movie he's made in years. Okay, and in a way, I think that's true. But it's also, it maintains that sense of true unadulterated night. You know, and I'm just really sad that the box office projections are not good. Because he financed this himself. It's another film that he financed himself. It cost, I think, a bit more money than some of the previous films he's made, because like this one is like on 35 millimeter and all that stuff. And I don't think it's gonna make much more money than Knock at the Cabin did, sadly, and which means it might not get to profit level at the box office. Like, I'm hoping it gets to profit eventually, like on home video and television and streaming and whatever. But I'm like, man, Shyamalan could use a hit. I wish like more people would see this.
No, I definitely agree. But like in terms of like that, I'm saying like, you know, she doesn't make the movie worse, and that's good. And I think that if she ever wanted to pursue acting, it wouldn't be that much of a horizontal move, honestly. And what I really like is that she has like these really kind of expressive, this really kind of expressive nature. Honestly, she kind of reminded me like a
Yes.
little bit of Anya Taylor Joy when she started out a little bit. She has that kind of like those eyes, those kind of eyes
Yeah,
that
she
I
really
enjoy.
does, right? Like, I mean, she also, I think, captures a lot with just her facial expressions, right?
Mm.
And I have to say that it really, like, I think one of the things that I just love is how, you would not expect that. I remember just going into the movie thinking, okay, she's going to be this figure in the background. She's going to be
Right.
like this person, no major role, just, the concert. She's like, okay, yeah, it's like a glorified guest star, and I'm like, holy crap, she's actually like one of the main cast. She's like, she takes over the movie for like
Yeah,
a good,
she takes the reins. Yeah.
yeah, for what was it, like a good 30 minutes or something?
Yep. Like she becomes the protagonist, and I think that's it's really, uh, it's a really bold move, and I didn't expect it. Like I was like, where is this movie going? Like, how long is this movie? I was really scared to check. Like, what's the runtime here? Um, and I God, it's so good. It's so good, and I love. I think that it leads to some of the more tense stuff because that entire part where like you're in the limbo, it's really tense. Like they're having a little bit of a stare off, and Hartnett is like tense, he's like just sitting there like stewing. And it's like even though he's been, of course, cornered. This is like the first time you're seeing him like just boil over.
Well, yeah, like it's ironic, but despite everything at the concert, it's like now his situation actually feels like even worse, right?
Exactly.
because he now, like, it seems like he's losing his cool. He's actually, like, you could tell he's like, he comes close to blowing up, you know? Like,
Yes, like
and
he like don't want to say anything because like he wants to control the temperament, the level of there, right?
right.
Um,
And I love how, like, that power dynamic just continues, like, in their house. It's like there's that one point where, he just stands up, and I think the camera, like, sort of it sort of shows him from a low angle, and he looks like a giant. Like, it's suddenly this moment where I think you should leave or something, or or whatever, and it's sort of, I'm like, whoa, because there's that threat of violence there, but it's also just like the fact that, like, suddenly, like, even the height difference between them is so accentuated, and so he starts to look even, like, kind of, like, more exaggerated, more monstrous, like,
mhm,
and that was, like, amazing. uh yeah, but, like, okay, look, I have to ask. So here's the thing: when the movie starts, right,
mhm,
and it's just him and his daughter,
mhm.
my expectation was that he was like a single parent, you
Right,
know?
yeah. I was so shocked that they mentioned like a wife. Like, what, mom? Like, where
Yeah,
did that come from? Like, it feels
yeah,
like something that would have been talked about way earlier.
yeah, but it's also kind of, like, it's also kind of natural, and yet kind of really surprising. It's almost like a shock when, they go to his home, and it turns out, wait, he has a wife and a kid, like,
Another son, a
and another
brother. Like,
kid.
what the hell?
Yeah, and I'm like, that to me is a great reveal. Like, I don't want to call it a twist or anything, but it's just like it feels both completely natural in a way, given everything that we've seen, but it's also, like, so surprising because the way they played it, you could have easily imagined him being like a single parent or divorced or whatever, you
Mhm,
know? So it was almost like, I think part of the shock of it is that when you do see his personal life, I think it's as much of a shock for the audience as it is for the character. Like, it really
mhm.
translates that sense of, like, whoa, what the, like, that sort of disorientation that she feels.
All right. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Um, because like it makes you it kind of overturns what you believe you know about his character. Like is like okay, yeah, he loves his daughter, but like he's still a serial killer. So then you realize that there is outer life of his. It kind of broadens your scope, but also I think it makes the the stakes that he's been playing with a lot
Yeah,
more volatile. Like, okay, now there's so much more like going on here, so much more that he's going to want to protect that what makes him more dangerous. It makes like okay, like he is not going to take this lightly because there obviously there is so much more here that is important to him. Like okay, there's a wife, now there's a son, and like now you're his home. Like it's a ticking. It's like you can feel like the tension, like the building. Like okay, something has got to give. You know.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'm just like, I mean, I guess, like, I think what, like, one thing that I mean, as usual, there are a lot of people talking about, is there a twist? What's the big twist? The twist is there is no twist, yada yada yada. And I really feel like, maybe one reason why that happens is because I think that, an M. Night Shyamalan movie continuously reveals new things about itself as it goes on,
Mhm.
you know? Like, it's like you start watching it, and slowly it sort of reveals more and more of itself. And sometimes and it's not necessarily plot stuff. It's more like, okay, this is really what we're doing. This is who the main character really is. This is like, what the genre of it really is, right? And it
Mhm.
kind of overturns your expectations, even if there is nothing that actually changes about the plot. So I'm kind of wondering, maybe that's like why so many people are still like, oh, well, it's all about the twist or whatever. And I'm like, well, no, it's like reveals, right? You don't have a clear, like, what you see in the beginning doesn't give you an immediate idea. It doesn't immediately define what this film is doing as a whole, right? Like,
Mhm.
I could, and a lot of movies do that. A lot of movies just have to define themselves in, like, the first, like, 10 minutes. And I just kind of love how, okay, no, we're going to gradually peel back the layers of this. We're not going to give you everything up front. And I love that it does. I love how Trap does that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think that at that point, because when you finally kind of cut to the core of it all, that's when the movie realizes very wisely to stop having that much fun, because this is like where things get really serious, because you're no longer in a structured environment. You're no longer playing. He's no longer playing by the rules imposed on him. He's
Hmm.
now like in his own element. He's playing by his own rules. So like I think that like if there had been more jokes in that last half, in that last act, it would have. I think the movie would have suffered for it, because
Oh
at that
yeah,
point, like, well, the movie doesn't take anything seriously. So by making this as serious as it is, it's I think this is what makes the movie go, like we saw this week. Someone was like, the second half of Trap is what makes it go from good to great. Like they're right, that person's right, because like this is what sells the movie. Like okay, it'd be a fun comedy no matter what, but like this is what makes it like I think one of M. Night's best thrillers, because the entire portion where Lady Raven, all right, um, is able to grab the phone and runs to the bathroom. The entire like minute that you hear like the arguing, the commotion
and
outside the bathroom, it is
yeah,
horrifying. Like just hearing it, like you hear the pounding, you hear like the floor shake, you hear like the doors and walls shake. Like what is going on out there? What could be going on out there? It is it just it sort of feeds into your imagination so well, and there's such a tactile, tangible nature to it. And just being in those shoes, being unaware, like being closed off from like this, like, whatever reality is out there. It's so good. I love that. Like
it
this is really scary.
Yeah, it was. It's like terrifying, and I think I think there was kind of like a Haneke effect, because like Michael Haneke, he loves to imply violence off screen, like behind closed doors and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
And the door is kind of a boundary, but it sort of forces you, because you can't really see anything. It sort of forces you to use your imagination, and for a little bit you have to wonder, man, did he just go like did he just completely lose it and like kill everybody off screen? Like if she opens the door, will there be all these bodies on the floor or something?
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, and it really like it's like I like to think of it as like almost like psychological violence. It just hits you, like so hard, like it is like that cool. And I like how no, that he didn't go like Shyamalan didn't go for that. Like again, you never even really see the guy's victims all that much. You know what I'm saying? Like there is no
Yeah.
luxuriating in the blood and gore of the serial murder, which I appreciated.
No, definitely. And I know when you mentioned like when he opens the door finally, when he gets back into the bathroom door, I was like scanning, just to see any like hint of blood, like for any clue as to what might have happened. But the fact that it gives away nothing, I think again, it feeds in, it puts you in Lady Raven's point of view, where like she doesn't
Yeah,
know what happened. So she's just as like frightened, she's just as unsure about what happened. And she even asked, and like she's like, no matter, let's get into the car, it is I don't know, it is thrilling. It's just a thrilling moment. It's just a thrilling set piece, and I do love what happens after when they get into the car, and they open the garage door and his family's escaped. He's like, I love that line. I've never looked at this house that way, like
yeah,
he's never. And so that's a great line, because you've been following the way he looks at the world, the entire film. As I mentioned, he's always scanning, he's always looking, he's always being perceptive, you
yeah.
know he's always looking for the exits for anything that he could use. And then like when you get to that point, like, oh, and when he says that line, it hits you because you've seen how he looks at the world. And then you realize, okay, but this is his home, so like you remember, like when you're at home, you're not thinking about like what the exits are, what the
Well,
best way to
okay.
escape your house is.
Well, okay, look, I would maybe push back against that a little bit, because remember he does have a tunnel there. He actually has like a hidden wall, like where he has like a go bag. He pulls that. I love it when he actually he just like without looking almost, he just kind of lowers this thing and pulls the bag out and puts it in
Yeah,
the.
yeah, I love that. Right. But in that way, those are just they're not like, those are things he imposed into the house. Like those things he built into the house,
Yeah,
not like things that the house had. So he's like
yeah,
saying like, oh, they jumped out the window and climbed on the tree. that's like making use of the house, not like creating something else. So that's no, I understand what you're saying. I had that thought too. Like, what, you have the fucking. My brother was talking about it after we watched the movie. Like, we had the fucking tunnel. What does he mean? But that's the way I figure it. What he means. But yeah, I love that because like it's like for as much vagueness they give like his own inner life, like stuff like that that's like a little tragic. It does a great job of like inuring tragedy to Hartnett's character, to Cooper, where it's
Yeah.
like he really felt like he could compartmentalize his life, you know,
Yes.
like this is what I do, but this is who I am, you know. Like
Yeah.
I kill people, but that's not who I am. I'm a good father. I'm a good husband. You know, I know I love my kids, I love my wife, all that kind of stuff. But I just need to do this once in a while, and like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, I can always come home. So it's like a little bit of a tragedy there. He's clearly delusional and psychotic, but it's like I think Carter is like a linchpin because like it's that twinge of sadness when he's like
Yeah.
he's acting like he's giving up the ghost, right? Where
Yeah.
he's like let's really let him go. And he's like choking up, talking about like he's telling his wife to the chores, to do when he's gone. He's choking. He's like choking up and like Jesus, this guy is good, but like then you have to wonder as well how much of that was an act.
Yeah, and I think that's a deliberate question raised by the movie. I think Knight has discussed it. At what point, like, is your, like your act or your performance for other people? At what point is that real? And it's interesting how, I kind of see some of the stuff that happens here almost as like a response to some of those like there was a whole cycle of television shows that were about like the lives of like the personal life of the serial killer, like Dexter and like Bates Motel and Hannibal. And there would always be this sort of recurring idea of like, okay, double life, keeping things separate, private and public, and then at some point there's some collapse and whatever. And it's fascinating how in a way like Dexter Morgan, for example, he never has to really reckon, or at least throughout much of the show, he doesn't have to reckon with his family discovering him and actually those two aspects of his life falling apart. Like what I love about this movie is that it tackles similar ideas, but it also weaves them into the visual language, of the film. Like it really again it's that sort of that notion of having boundaries coming apart, space being violated. It's like so formalized, it's like so within the structure of the film and within the cinematography and everything. Like it's very the way that it's formally executed, it works perfectly with the story being told. And in a way, like, yeah, I kind of think it's almost like a response to that stuff that like you would not get on a show like Dexter. You would not get like the guy basically being exposed to his family directly and having to reckon with the consequences of that, and like his wife like knowing exactly who he is and stuff. Like it was like, yeah, like he I kind of, my take on it though was that he originally, like, he viewed his personal life, his family life, as the mask. Like he really is the butcher, but for him, like, the performance was his family. And now he realizes that like this also became real for him. He always wanted to keep it separate, but like it's like he came to love being, like he came to love being a father. He came to
Mhm.
love being a husband. And for me, that's actually one of the things that I really liked about the final 15 minutes, where
Oh right, that's amazing
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, because we have again a kind of a switch in perspective, right? Like just for that final segment, like when it's all from his wife's point of view now. And um, it's like I keep feeling I'm just like, why are people so down on this? Like I keep
Oh,
reading,
I have
oh, the
no
movie.
idea.
Yeah,
I can understand like Suleika, like I think she's a great job. She's not that great an actor, but people keep saying like the very last couple minutes, like our a masterpiece. I mean, every fucking thing that Hartnett does, like once he walks back in through the back door of that kitchen, is like the most on nails thing I've ever seen M. Night do. Okay, it is like
Mm.
like Hartnett is like eating up all of the dialogue. Every fucking word is like he could stop talking at this moment and just rush at her. Like he is like a caged animal. He's like she's stuck in like a room with a lion. Okay,
Yeah.
this is a dangerous being, and like you like at what point is he just going to just make that switch? And it's like it's so tense. It's so like that you cut it with a knife at this point. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. So people don't like, oh, I'm unsure about that. Oh my god, you are a moron. Okay, you're a
Oh,
moron.
yeah, like, wait, you want the movie to be over earlier, maybe for like, okay, too many turns and like whatever. But I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So like the movie is about like this collapse of boundaries on some level, right? And it's like here, it's like taking that like that's like the whole point in a way, right? Like at this point, it's like, okay, all the boundaries have now collapsed, right? Like he is both a husband and like he's the butcher all in one, you know? Like it's like it's like she knows who he is. There are no more secrets
Lies.
anymore, right? Yeah, there are no more lies. And on some and apparently it's like, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, maybe there will be this reveal that somebody gave him up. Maybe what if his daughter like gave him up? That's how the police like got like the tip or whatever. And it's like, no, it actually works better that it's his wife, because his wife would, she kind of came to understand, like, just on she knows him too well, you know.
Mhm.
And so it's like a person, and and so he, like, logically he could have just like gotten away, like that's what the butcher would do. But he's also Cooper, he's also a husband, and he's like, I'm actually angry about this. Like, you betray, I'm never going to see my kids again. Okay, like, you didn't have to do this to me,
Yeah,
so
it is a wonderful monologue. Like
yeah.
she is shocked. Like I am not going to see him grow up. It is again, it's tragic, but there's always the underlying thing where like, how much of this is could any of this, or how much of this is justification for just wanting one last kill?
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't know, but I like to think, yeah, like it's like all of his, his two selves are now basically, it's like they've become one. It's like everything has, the boundary has completely fallen apart. Now it's all merged. Even like that whole thing with the pie. I was like, oh man, the pie has got to be poisoned or something, right? Like, but,
I was shocked. I was shocked. I didn't see that coming. I thought like this is it for her. Obviously, it makes sense in retrospect. But like, oh, what do you feel when he finds that powder? Like, oh shit, like is that like Clorox or something? It's wonderful. That like
yeah.
bleach.
Yeah, but it's like it's his bag, because he did forget his bag. I was like, oh, what happened to? Oh, what about his go bag? Is he gonna leave that behind or what? And I'm like, okay, yeah. So it's like a familiar. It's like one, the pie is like that part of the family life, and then you have his knockout. I don't know, Clorox or whatever, right? His powder, which is part of his butcher life, right? And again, they're combined into one thing, you
Mm.
know like I just love that, right? And then like, even, and then finally it's like they pay off that whole thing with his mom, right? So now the identities collapse, because like he sees, and I remember throughout the movie, right, like the profiler character, I was like thinking, it's weird, she kind of looks like his mom a little bit, like I was wondering, is there something going on there, or is she just old, or is that why he's like afraid to even, is that why he's avoiding her? And then it's like right, like right at the end, the identities of these two like merge. So I just, oh, it's okay. There she is. He sees her as his mom. Like now it's like, again, right? Like it's all collapsed together. And I'm like, yeah, just, you look at that progression just thematically, and I'm like, it is so on point. It is so, you feel that logic right there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. No, it's magical, and I feel like it ends on the perfect button because I feel like M Night at some point. I'm not quite sure if this is always how it ended. Maybe I feel like it's just something that happened during the production, where he realizes like where he realized maybe that you're kind of because you're along for the ride with Cooper the entire film. It's hard to want to see the morality play out too much, you know? Because
Mm,
because he is the underdog, and you're along with thrive him. You're going through his motions. You're going through his thought process. You know, you kind of emphasize him even. So I feel like that kind of in influenced the final beat. You know, because like at that point, people were cheering in my theater. Like, hell yeah, like hell yeah. I mean, he wanted it. You know, he just wanted it more. He earned it. Sorry, but like next, better luck next time. He earned it. Okay, he earned
yeah,
it. Like,
I would say that I just kind of I just loved the beat with the bike in any case. Like I'm like whether that had any effect. I'm just like, oh right, he has to correct because the bike is not in the right place. He needs to, like but even so it's like later, oh wait a sec. Okay, so there's a bit more to but I just love both moments, you know, because it's like that irony, right? Like again, that private public collapse, like it's like he does something he would do as a father in a way, but also as like a guy obsessed with keeping every like with I think he has OCD maybe or something, right? And so that's something that it feels so natural for him to do, but also okay, wait, he actually uses a piece of the, I don't know, like the thing in the bike to, like to free himself,
yeah,
right? And I feel, yeah, that's totally earned. That I really like that. But also I love the credits scene.
the mid credits, yeah.
Sorry?
Well, the mid credits, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So mid credits. Like, it wasn't post credit. Yeah, it was mid credits. But like to me, it's just it's another. It's like one of those. It's like a final bit of joke. Like it's like a final joke, like a bit of levity.
Yeah,
For me
it's
to
a
like.
release.
Yes, yes, exactly. Like, because after all of that, it's just like, oh, okay, now we can get back to a bit more of the humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, man, that was awesome. I just want to like clap, and I like want to see the movie
Yeah,
again.
people were like cheering my theater. I'm telling you, like it was very crowd pleasing. And one thing about that bicycle thing is that my theory was that maybe I think maybe he set it up ahead of time because he mentions again like he never thought of his house. He never looked at his house through those eyes. I kind of think that he like okay, if I need to exit the house or if they get me, um, I'm going to use that part of the bicycle. I think that was his thought process there.
Maybe. I just like to think he's good at thinking on his feet because
You're
it's
right.
like,
No, in the film, he is very lucky. A lot of times in the movie, like he is very lucky and very quick witted with like using whatever he has on hand.
yeah,
I think that like it I think I think he even knows how lucky he is. Like even he can't believe how absurd the events have been. Like yeah, at some point someone should have caught me. I think that's what's influencing like his final his expression at the end. Like he just can't believe his luck. He just can't believe it. Like it's like because even like in the film where like he'll do something and no one will catch him. You know, like or like he'll need a lie and the lie happens. You know, or he'll need something to escape a place, and he just appears, you know, or like he's able to use something right next to him to do it. It's 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 like the he's like you know God's favorite idiot, you know.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that's kind of at least the first half of the movie is in a way it's almost making things a bit too easy for him, right?
Hmm?
But I think that's by design because then it gets really, really hard, in
Yeah.
the second half. Like again, it's like I love how there's that interplay, right? Like that contrast, that sort of almost geometric precision, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, and Okay, so okay, so I want to ask. So you know how like the cops and everything, like
Mhm.
they taser him?
Mhm.
Okay, watching that scene, did you get any sense that, hey, maybe Cooper is like superhuman? Maybe he's like maybe he's like the Beast or something?
I could feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just like, it was interesting how, like, also it's like like his figure becomes, it's like there's this emphasis now on his body, and it's a bit more,
Yes.
it's a
He looks a little bit schlubby in about the first half of the film. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, he does, but now it's like you say, holy crap, this guy
he
is
is
like,
ripped.
yeah, he is ripped. He's like, he looks almost superhuman, right? Like animalistic too.
Mhm.
And and it's like they keep shooting him with tasers, but it's like it doesn't seem to stop him. So for a second I thought, holy crap, is he gonna, like, is he gonna do like a Kevin Wendell Crumb thing now?
I mean, like it kind of really kind of ride that line, especially in the car between him and Lady Raven when he's trying to like kidnap her. Like it's very much like a Kevin Wendell Crumb thing where he's definitely trying to like embody his mother to get him to stop. It's like you're
Yes.
being a bad boy. You need to stop. You think that you need to be punished. That kind of thing. Um, which again, it adds to that kind of to that weird off-putting uncanniness to the humor. But I definitely got like split vibes during that scene, and I can definitely see if like that was part of the intention to like add that parallel. And it definitely like it makes you wonder like maybe he's got the unbreakable thing, the belief.
Yeah, like, I mean, at least, like, I briefly, I feel like you know, knowing other Shyamalan movies, it's like you entertain the possibility, you know, ever so briefly.
Mhm.
Yeah, but okay, so here's a question: do you think the implication in the film is that he was born this way, like he was sort of born bad in a way, or that he became this way because of his mother?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like the mother thing is probably abuse. Maybe I think that's what I got from it the most.
Okay. Yeah. Because I don't know. I was thinking it's interesting how um they don't really define that. It's I
It's
but
very
I
it's very vague. Yeah,
yeah, like part
I
of
think
it.
I feel like that they put. I feel like that maybe it's because they feel like if they put too much of a pin on it, it kind of hones the movie down. You're like, oh, now it's about this. This movie's about this, rather than
Yeah.
just. But being open ended, it sort of lets the movie stand on its own. Like, oh no, it's about abuse or it's about trauma. It could be about anything, but that's not the point of the film. I feel like if they made like it made it specific or put a pin in it in something, and that would take away from the movie's actual message and themes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a I agree with that. I think that's a great point. And I kind of like how, you can read it in such a way that, okay, maybe he was always like this, and it's just that his mother was the only person who understood that, right? Like, that the people who get close to him enough, they sort of understand what he really is on some level, like, and
Mhm.
I thought that was a I thought that was a not, I thought that was a good approach to just like not define it entirely. Uh,
No, I definitely agree. But let's see here. Um, I just want to say one thing. Is that when people say like this movie is illogical, I mean like you're watching a movie where a guy is a serial killer trapped at a pop concert. Um, I feel like why do you even care about like oh man it doesn't make sense that he did this and didn't do that. Who gives a fuck? I'm sorry. Illogical has gone out the window. Now, if you want to talk about like specifics of the plot, something like that, sure, let's do it. But I feel like the entire thing is more, again, um, thematic. It's interested more in how to explore certain themes, like fatherhood, family life balance, that kind of thing.
No, for certain. I feel like complaints like this go back, so far with Shyamalan. It's like, I still like read people getting hung up on signs with the whole water thing.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know,
Like it's like who gives a fuck? It's meant to be holy water. Okay, he's found his faith again. That's the point. Jesus Christ.
yes. Yes, exactly. And I mean, to me, it's like, okay, I understand that in some contexts, okay, plausibility becomes like a thing, right? But to me, it often it's like if you pay attention to plausibility and all of that stuff, it's like that usually means that something about it may not be working like elsewhere. Like, it's like, okay, if the character stuff doesn't, if the characterization, if the character action doesn't make sense, then you start to notice the plot. If they don't sell it emotionally, for example, then you
Yeah,
start to really pay attention to
focus
the
on
plot
other
there.
things. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think like here, it's like, no, I think everything works. You can like, like you can poke holes in the whole premise of it. I mean, like, okay, like they have like 3,000 men. Are they gonna spend like, like how much time do they need to process all 3,000, like guys or whatever? But it's like I'm like, well, who cares? Like because that's not really, the point. They sell all of this. They sell like the core. They sell like they sell everything on a scene by scene basis. It just holds together like so nicely.
right.
Yeah, and so I just wish like people would stop like just doing like all of like the left brain, logical nitpicking stuff and just sort of say, okay, this is what really didn't work for me.
Exactly, because when you start to interrogate the kind of thing about yourself, you understand more about your own preferences and about why certain things just didn't gel for you. But if you're like, oh, but this was stupid that they did that. Okay, who gives a fuck? Interrogate that in a little bit more. Invest in it a little more. Why? Why? Okay, so if you think it was stupid, then what was the root cause of that? Then because I
Yeah.
could think something stupid in one of his films, but like at the end of the day, he wrote it to be that way. So, you know, um, let's look into see why the scene doesn't work on like an actual sort of narrative level, in terms of thematics, in terms of emotional core, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, like, I mean, I read some people are like, there would be there's, like, this complaint about how, oh, he, when he learns about the backstage, right? So he goes and he, uh, finds M. Night Shyamalan, right? Like, he in the crowd, and and it's like, and I love this cameo, right? Because in the narrative, he is Lady Raven's uncle, right? So
Yeah.
so M. Night Shyamalan, the father of Suleika, is like is now within this narrative, within this fictional context, he's her uncle.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, and people are like, well, he just happens to find her uncle, and it's like, so and I'm like thinking to myself, no, wait a minute, like this whole movie is about that collapse, right? About boundaries and space and pride, and I'm like, an identity and everything, and I'm like, I love this meta. I love the meta aspect of this cameo, you know, like,
Oh, definitely. I feel like it's yeah, it speaks more about like, again, some people have said it to mean more about like the fatherhood aspect. Like he's no longer a father in this context, like he's now like another kind of a paternal authority figure, you know. But then
yeah,
it also like she's the star. So like so it adds. I feel like there's definitely something at play there where it's like how do you work within this new context with each other. And I
yeah.
think so it does add to that. I think that it's something to really dig into. It's a really interesting cameo. I think probably his most interesting cameo since Old itself. Old is a really great one because it talks about like because he knows you're expecting the cameo. So it's like, well, how do we make this cameo work in a way that adds to the themes? And I think like this and Old really do work because like okay, this is M. Night Shyamalan, he made the movie, so like what does this cameo say about him and in the process of making the movie you know
Yeah, like the overseer with like the lens and
Yeah,
everything, I
like he
guess.
like he like he basically, it's the voyeuristic nature of horror, is basically what it's saying about
Hmm.
that. Where it's like, he like basically for his own volition, for the volition of like the people paying him, basically he filmed and recorded all this human suffering. And so like that's great. It's a little great little commentary on horror that he added there.
I,
Um
I I still prefer, Jai Hooters fan, like former drug dealer in the Unbreakable trilogy.
yeah,
It's
power of positive thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Like no, but I'm just kind of happy how it's like they turned all of those cameos into what is basically like a three movie arc
Right.
essentially, right? Like it becomes like a whole supporting role just over the like just incidentally. Um, and yeah, and I thought that was great. No, but I also think like even just going back to that scene, I was like, oh my god, he's like the way that he lied about like his daughter having leukemia,
Mhm.
right? I was just like, oh my god, he's actually doing that. That is like such a it's like such a I don't know, but just something about that. It's like that is like such a dick move. That is just that is like something just something morally like wrong with that, but it's also kind of awesome and it's hilarious, you
Mm,
know?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it worked, and like it makes sense. You believe that he would absolutely do that. Like to me, it's more like, okay, I don't care about the fact that this guy happens to be like Lady Raven's uncle. I'm like, I care about the fact that like okay, Cooper is like selling like so well this lie, and and it's kind of and that tells you a lot about his character, and it's completely believable. Like that to me just works like so well, you know. So it's like if you're hung up on the fact that like well he just happens to run into Lady Raven's uncle, then I think you're paying attention to the wrong, uh, to the wrong thing, you know?
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I think like that goes the same for all of Knight's films. Now, on my perception, like I wouldn't call this his best. I think like this is definitely within his top 10. I really enjoyed it, but like I still, when I think about his films, like I still enjoyed old more. Like it's so hard. Like I look at
Uh,
my ranking. I'm I expected this to rank really high, but I'm like, damn, but no, you have old. They're not gonna carry. You have glass. You have split. You have. Oh, I think whenever someone say like he's hit or miss, I'm like, I think they're only really thinking about like three movies out of like his 14, 14,
mhm.
15. They're like, I don't know if that qualifies as hit or miss, honestly. You know, seems like he's mostly doing hits. You know,
I I think in terms of quality, a lot of his movies, at least like they do have like a high baseline, and it's I mean for me it's like I feel okay, I think like after Glass, this is the best Shyamalan movie. Like I mean I have issues with Old, and I think Knock at the Cabin is pretty good, but still kind of maybe a bit too maybe a bit too Hollywood friendly for me. Whereas like this, I think was just like this perfect. This is like okay, this is true Shyamalan. This is like Shyamalan uncompromising, but also it can work. And I don't know. I think that just puts it in the upper echelon, like for me. Like like if I had like that tier maker thing, I would totally okay. This is like an S rank Shyamalan movie um, for me, and like the best one out of the best of his post Glass output. Yeah, but it's like hard. It's like hard to always, because yeah, a lot of strong films, but just I feel the critics, unfortunately, at least in the United States, it like takes them several years to catch up.
no, definitely. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. A lot of people have said like, "Oh man, he tricked us into watching a concert that his daughter made." Like, one, what do you think the movie was going to be about? Okay, I'm sorry,
Yes.
but the movie has not been a child that said a concert, and it's basically almost real time. Okay, so one, you're dumb. Okay, two, the songs are good. The songs are good. I like the songs a lot. I had no idea that
Yeah,
the song in the trailer was actually one of the songs. I didn't know that until I saw it. So we're like, oh wait, so the song in the trailer was one of the Lady Raven songs. It's a good fucking song in the trailer. You know?
yeah, they are. I'm really curious, like because we only see snippets of a lot of those perform or not snippets, but like we don't see the whole performance, right? And I'm like, I would love it if they just released like the uncut, like Lady Raven sequences, so we can just see the whole concert thing, like what they did for that. I mean, they're already releasing the soundtrack, I think. So would be cool to just like see all of that in video.
Speaking of the soundtrack, I'm actually wondering like if maybe there is a case to be made for for like best original song. Let's get this.
Uh,
Let's get an Oscar in that household. Let's do it.
uh, I don't know. Oscars are like I don't really believe in the Oscars anymore.
Who does? But still, let's do it. Who cares?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Just I mean, could help if it helps with the with the prestige and maybe getting this movie some more accolades. Because I'm like hoping I'm sort of feeling okay. This might be yet another night film that'll take a few years for the for the for the for more people to appreciate. But yeah. So an Oscar could help with that, I think.
No, definitely. Anyway, any other thoughts?
Uh, no, I don't know, not really. I'm hoping, I'm hoping like this film makes money. I hope Shyamalan keeps making movies in this, like in the mode that he's been making them. It's interesting how he seems to be. I think like after Glass, he's sort of started to gravitate, like he sort of started to move away a little bit from doing the contained thriller mode. Like he's sort of been opening his movies up, and this is, I think, maybe the culmination of that in some ways. It's like the most open film. It's still kind of claustrophobic and everything, but it has like multiple locations and stuff like that. Um,
It's always on the move.
yes, yes, exactly. So I hope that whatever this film's box office take ultimately is, that it does not prevent Shyamalan from making more self-financed films. Like I hope that like he's able to, um, just like keep at it.
No, definitely. And I agree. I hope that this movie, doesn't, fade away too easily. I think it's definitely one of the ones that I think is his best crowd pleaser in a while. Like I feel, even though I love Old and Glass, I feel like those play a little bit rough. Like you have to really, really
Oh,
into M Night Shyamalan to really enjoy those. And even then,
yeah.
I've heard a lot because Old, like it's got like his most deranged dialogue in a while. You know,
Yeah,
I,
that's true. It was kind
like
of
I'm shocked that people say that like Trap has bad dialogue. Like I didn't really know, nothing really stood out to me that badly. In comparison to like Shyamalan, it's like it just seems like regular dialogue. Compared
yeah.
to his other films. Old is just like, what are these people saying, man? I'm
Yeah.
with it. I like it. I think I love his corny ass dialogue, but Jesus, what are we doing here
Yeah,
with some of these words?
it was painful sometimes, and I think for me it was like, nobody, like they're in international, like they're in, like they're an international couple, like, and yet nobody ever speaks in their home language, and I don't know why, but for some reason for me that's like that has kind of bugged me. So just like the English, so the dialogue is already a little clunky, but I think like because it's like a second language for the actors, and I think they were having trouble with it or something because it came out like more stilted than I think it was intended to be. I don't know. um
I mean, I feel like for most part, like the performances worked, even if the lines reading didn't. Like
yeah.
just their like their physicality, facial expressions, like
Oh
they're still
god,
just
yes.
this old is fucking amazing with that kind of stuff. So even if they're struggling with the words, like they're bringing it. Like she's Gabriel Garcia Bernal is amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a revelation in that movie. Um, anyway, so like Keep Trap, like I feel like it's really standard in terms of like his catalog. I really enjoyed it. I think the last 15 minutes are fucking showcase of his powers, of his strengths, and it's just really funny. It's a good movie. It's a crowd pleaser. I hope it has legs. I hope people go out and see it. It is.
Masterpiece.
It is. I don't know, man.
I would I'm sorry. That's what I think right now. I'm open to changing later, but yeah, I'm gonna say for me, it's like maybe top 5, top 10, something. Top 6, something like that.
It's in my top 10 at like number 9, like right above
Uh,
Lay in the Water. But sorry, that's just because I know if they could all get first place, that's how I would do
no,
it, because like all of them are so good. I only really I only really rank them like because they're everyone is just a
yeah,
smidge. I just prefer each one a smidge more than the other one, because like
yeah,
that's how my top 10 is right now. It's like this one's like a little bit. Enjoy, have fun, more fun with this one than that one. I feel like this one's a little more thrilling. I feel like this one's a little more scary. So like that's where my top five. But they're all so neck and neck, which is why I feel like the hit and miss thing is pretty unwarranted because they're all so good. They're all so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, like, it's I feel like for the last like 5 6 years, it's almost like the new Shyamalan film comes out. Oh, it's the best film since like 20 something years. It's like the best film since Signs, or the best film since The Village, or like, and he's back. Or it's like the next one comes, okay, again, and he's back, and it's and I'm just like, guys, okay, this is getting old, quite literally. Just it's like, if you actually look at his output as a whole, no, it's been pretty consistent. Like maybe a couple of failures here, and like maybe just like maybe like a couple of failures, maybe like really only one, maybe like Last Airbender. But like as a whole, man, it's a really strong output. And a lot of these films, just, I think people did not understand them, or there was marketing, or like whatever. Okay, did not have great critical reception at the time, but in hindsight, what can I say? Like a lot of them are just really good films.
100%. But anyway, I think we should wrap up here. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if there's anything else. Let me you can sign out. See what you have
Uh,
to say.
sure. All right. So, all right. Well, anyway, thank you for listening to us, and you can catch me on Twitter at MLS532. And you can take a look at and please take a look at my newsletter on Substack. It's called textualvariations.substack.com. Uh, One of my recent articles also is about the Unbreakable trilogy. So if anybody's interested in Shyamalan, please read.
The masterpiece of a trilogy. I was planning on rewatching them today. I was like, I should probably make room for the happening. Um, I need to rewatch that. People keep talking it up recently, like, maybe we should give it another shot. It's pretty low on my list. And
It's
you can
it's
find,
nice.
yeah, it's nice. And you can find me on Twitter at THC_SNICKMAN, where I post a bunch of stuff like this, and do these roundtables for my friends and cohorts on Twitter as well. And so always a fun time. And just thank you so much, Mikhail, for joining me here to talk about these. What a weekend! What a
Yeah.
weekend!
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Let's do Alien and Romulus next.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I'd like that.
Let's see how it stacks up to the magnificent David trilogy. It'll happen. It'll happen.
Oh, well,
All right.
maybe. Yeah.
See ya.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye.